I don't have.
Oh. There two here. That's yours.
That's mine. That's why.
I'm just taking stuff.
Yeah.
I was. Oh, how long was I phone before? She's the president. Why is it saying?
Yeah, but does.
She's coming, I think.
Distinguished representatives, I declare open the fourth plenary meeting. This afternoon, we will continue the consideration of Agenda Item 7, General Debate. States are invited in accordance with Rule 50 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly to deliver statements of no longer than 5 minutes. In order to assist the speakers with the timely delivery of their statements, a light mechanism was installed at the lectern. In order to accommodate all speakers, this time limit shall be strictly observed. As indicated this morning, written or pre-recorded statements submitted in lieu of in-person statements as of yesterday will be posted on the respective webpage of the Assembly. I would invite delegations to please check the list of speakers dated 2nd of December 25 at 13 hours 15, available at the conference officer's desk, as there have been multiple changes. Let us proceed immediately with our first speaker. We have Central African Republic, Sa Excellence Madame Sylvie Paipoutemon, Ministre des Affaires étrangères.
Minister of Foreign Affairs, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President of the ASP, Madam President of the ICC, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, heads of delegations of the states parties, Excellencies, the representatives of international organizations, distinguished representatives of the United Nations agencies and African Union bodies, experts, members of civil society, distinguished figures, one and all. It's an honor for me to speak on behalf of the Central African Republic, my country, on the occasion of this 24th session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute. I would like to begin by expressing my country's gratitude to the President of the Assembly, to the Secretariat, and also to the International Criminal Court for having organized this critical event to strengthen international justice and to consolidate the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, since we adhered to the Rome Statute, the Central African Republic has remained firmly attached to the founding principles of the ICC. The fight against impunity, the protection of witnesses and victims, promoting lasting peace, and the promotion of human rights are all things that we hold dear. My country has gone through a crisis that deeply tore apart our social fabric. We know this better than anybody. Independent, impartial justice that's accessible makes a huge difference, and this is why we have fully cooperated with the International Criminal Court in the case of the situations that were open in the Central African Republic. It's important for me to recall that my country is not only one of the states party to the Rome Statute, but also, and more importantly, a situation country that is engaged in effective cooperation with the ICC for the execution of its orders. By way of example, amongst the 6 prisoners of the ICC, 3 are nationals of the Central African Republic. The Central African Republic has exercised a series of warrants to bring in those who had warrants hanging over them. Secondly, we have a duty to fight against impunity. The Central African Republic, along with support with the international community, has come up with a special hybrid jurisdiction with international and national judges that respond to the concerns of the people of my country in general, and also makes it possible for us to have proximity in justice that's close to the victims and the witnesses in particular. The Office of the Prosecutor and the preliminary chamber of the ICC have expressed their decision not to consider to monitor the situation in the Central African Republic, and this is something that is a development thanks to the assessment that the authorities in my country are now in a position to proceed forward with these cases and to make sure that they can all be fully prosecuted fairly and impartially. And the special hybrid court is something that's also very quickly managed to address the concerns of our people, to fight against impunity and any attacks on victims, families, witnesses, etc. Madam President, our country has undergone a thoroughgoing institutional reform on both the judiciary and in terms of security. This has made a big difference when it comes to justice and reconciliation. For example, the strengthening of the special court, the rehabilitation of the national judiciary, the intensification of exercises for identification, reparations, and reconciliation, and also gender and sex violence. All of this against a backdrop of extreme fragility. This stands as proof of our determination to offer to the people in our country truly sovereign justice under the principle of complementarity which governs the work of the ICC. Ladies and gentlemen, the fight against impunity can only be effective if we stand in solidarity internationally, nor can it be possible without a sustained commitment for institutional renewal. We call on the international community to step up its cooperation with conflict-ridden African countries, and in particular coming up with financial resources that are adapted to the realities on the ground, and also capacity building when it comes to investigations and prosecutions, when it comes to protection of witnesses, victims, and also when it comes to outreach to young people in the affected communities. We remain convinced that lasting peace requires justice. Justice must be effective, and for this we need enhanced international cooperation. We support the efforts undertaken and encourage states to build an architecture that is truly useful when it comes to justice. And for this, we would recommend improving the way in which the Corps works, to shorten the time span of procedures and to strike a better balance between the rights of the victims and the defense, and to ensure the universality of the Rome Statute. The victims are at the heart of the Rome Statute system, and our country is grateful for this. We're grateful in particular for the work of the Trust Fund for Victims and the programs for reparations and everything that is geared towards restoring the dignity of the survivors. We express our gratitude to the donor countries and call on an increase in the amount of resources for victims, and in particular in the most vulnerable situations. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude by saying the following. The Central African Republic reiterates its absolute conviction to work for international justice, to fight against impunity, and to build a lasting peace for our people and for all the people of the world. We remain convinced that together, we, states, parties, judicial institutions, international organizations, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders can work together to build a more humane world where all of our rights are duly protected. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And the next speaker will be Her Excellency Madame Nyeri Wachira, Senior Deputy Solicitor General and Head of International Law Division Office of Kenya. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, heads of delegation, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The Kenya delegation is honored to participate in this 24th session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court was established as a beacon of hope as part of a world order that sought higher human ideals to end impunity for the perpetrators of crimes of concern to the international community. By dint of the Rome Statute, the community of nations also sought a court of last resort, a court that would investigate and prosecute individuals when national systems fail to hold perpetrators accountable and deter future crimes. As part of this criminal justice system, Every state has a solemn duty to establish a mechanism of first instance to deal with international crimes whenever they arise within their jurisdiction. In affirmation of this global quest to entrench accountability for the most egregious international crimes, Kenya acceded to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court on the 11th of August, 1999, and ratified it on 15th March, 2005. As the contours of the global order are getting redefined, Kenya today reaffirms its continued support for the independence, impartiality, and integrity of the ICC, which is a vital pillar of international justice. We do so well aware that the principles of cooperation and complementarity underpin the success of this arc of the international criminal justice system. Madam President, Excellencies, at the heart of any international justice system is the imperative to secure justice for the victims. In that accord, witness protection becomes one of the most consequential levers in international justice because it enables witnesses and victims of crime, especially of those cases involving crimes against the Rome Statute, to testify safely without fear of retaliation, thereby securing evidence needed for successful prosecutions. Effective protection of witnesses is essential to make the wheels of justice spin faster, as witness testimonies are vital for uncovering the truth, particularly in complex transnational cases where traditional investigations may be challenging. Over the years, Kenya has continued to reform its criminal justice system and strengthen its domestic capacity to investigate, prosecute, and adjudicate international crimes. In this context, we continue to advance witness protection frameworks, mutual legal assistance tools, and complementary legislation to ensure that accountability is not merely an aspirational tenet, but an achievable goal. Our efforts reflect the central principle of complementarity, a cornerstone of the Rome Statute, and Kenya calls on states to embrace the continued partnership between the court and national jurisdictions to make this principle meaningful in practice. In this regard, Kenya just last week hosted the Africa Conference of the Witness Protection Agencies from the 26th to 27th November 2025 in Nairobi. This conference underscored the necessity of witness protection agencies from different African countries working together to realize our shared aspiration of strengthening the criminal justice systems in our respective countries through enhanced, robust witness protection systems. Madam President, on the matter of financing, Kenya appreciates that the International Criminal Court continues to operate in an increasingly constrained financial environment. Kenya acknowledges the growing workload, the rising complexity of situations, and the operational pressures placed upon the court. In this regard, sustainable and predictable financing remains critical to maintaining the court's independence and integrity. Kenya therefore supports a budgetary approach that prioritizes essential activities, ensures value for money, and maintains a balanced, sustainable, and fair burden-sharing arrangement among states parties. We also encourage continued adherence to established financial regulations to ensure prudent utilization of resources. Kenya also notes with appreciation the continued expansion of voluntary funding streams and special purpose trust funds to the court, and is confident that the funds will be also utilized within the established financial framework to ensure transparency and achievement of the court's long-term strategic priorities. Strengthening oversight in this area will reinforce confidence among all states parties. Madam President, Excellencies, Kenya notes with appreciation that some of the internal challenges that the ICC is facing are being addressed by the Bureau of the Assembly and hopes that the reforms and internal processes are completed in a fair and transparent manner to ensure and protect the integrity and smooth functioning of the court. Kenya also reiterates the urgent need to finalize the reform of the Bureau of the Assembly of States Parties to ensure equitable geographical representation based on the objective criteria established within the statute. With the increasing contribution of regional mechanisms in conflict resolution, as contemplated by Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, Kenya notes with appreciation the ongoing efforts aimed at intensifying dialogue with the African Union to strengthen the relationship between the Court and the African Union, and welcomes the Court's regular engagement with the African Union in this regard. In celebration of the solidarity within the community of nations, Kenya expresses her immense gratitude to all partner states for the support rendered in the election of Professor Phoebe Okowa as a judge for the International Court of Justice to fill a casual vacancy that arose in the court. I repeat again, it would be remiss of me not to thank all partner states who elected Professor Phoebe Okowa. And as the 2026 regular elections beckon, we call on the gracious support and consideration of all states in facilitating her transition to a full 9-year tenure. In conclusion, Kenya also pays tribute to the court and all staff members who often work under challenging circumstances to advance the cause of justice. Their dedication, together with the cooperation of states parties, remains the single and most important cog in the engine of the Rome Statute system. Kenya reaffirms that the fight against impunity is a shared responsibility. No single institution or state can discharge this mandate alone. Success requires a strengthened partnership between national systems, regional bodies, and the court. Kenya continues to advance this cause through cooperation, legislative innovation, and continued engagement with this assembly. Our collective unity is our strength, and our shared commitment to justice is the foundation of this institution. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. The
next speaker on the list is His Excellency Mr. Skander Dengezli, the Ambassador of Tunisia to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor, sir. Madam President, at this 24th session of the ASP of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and on behalf of the Tunisian Republic, it's my honor to congratulate you warmly on all of the efforts undertaken to prosecute and punish the most serious international crimes. Your commitment, everything that you do, are indispensable to fight against the impunity of the authors of mass crimes and to deliver justice to the victims and their families. Beyond cooperation with the court, states party must take action and do everything in their power to protect our court against threats, intimidation, and sanctions that have been leveled against it. This is why Tunisia reiterates its constant support to the court. We are unwavering in this support, as we've already made quite clear in the joint declaration of other states on the 7th of February 2025. This support extends to the judges, its elected officers, and its staff against all types of intimidation or threats that seek to hinder the independent and impartial discharge of their duties. Tunisia is proud to announce that we pay our annual assessed contributions to the ICC on time in full, and we would call on other states parties to do the same thing so that the court can fulfill all of its missions. These resources are necessary for it to do so. Here we would like to recall the respect of multilingualism and the rules governing that set forth in the Rome Statute. Now today the court is facing major challenges. We all see this. We all see day in, day out atrocities and similar horrors committed against innocent civilians in several places across the globe. The court remains the fundamental instrument of international criminal justice. It's a critical tool for promoting peace and security. And this is why Tunisia calls for the universality of the Rome Statute. The Tunisian government also welcomes the progress that has been made in the investigations in situations in countries that are concerned by international crimes. Here, I would also like to refer to the close coordination between the court and a variety of Tunisian institutions as part of respect for and the implementation of the principle of cooperation, which remains essential to the work of the court. Tunisia has expressed its satisfaction when a ceasefire agreement was reached in Gaza after 2 years of crimes of genocide that have provoked an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. A signing of a ceasefire, nonetheless, should not put an end to prosecuting those who are responsible within the occupying entity so that they can be brought to justice to be held to account for the crimes and collective punishment that they've committed. The Tunisian government condemns in the strongest possible terms the fact that the occupying entity continues to kill innocent civilians in Palestine in full impunity despite having signed the ceasefire. President, I would like to praise the work of the various jurisdictional administrative organs of the ICC as well as the working groups that report to the ASP. I'm grateful for their steadfast commitment to bring international justice into reality, to preserve our national memory, and to provide economic, social, and psychological support to victims. Thank you.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker will be Ms. Lucia Garcia Rico, Director General for the United Nations International Organizations and Human Rights at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Spain. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Excellencies, heads of delegations, distinguished delegates. It's an honor for me to speak on behalf of Spain at this Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute. My country aligns itself with the statement of the European Union. Spain is firmly committed to the ICC as a fundamental pillar of the international criminal justice system and the multilateral order based on international law. This is because we are firmly convinced that the multilateral system based on international law remains just as necessary today as and this covers protection of human rights and international humanitarian law. We've had a very consistent approach to all of this. Now, Madam President, we are facing many challenges to multilateralism and international law. The states parties here should stand united in their response. Spain upholds the independence, the impartiality, and the integrity of the ICC against the measures that have been leveled at the institution, its elected officials, and its staff, and those that cooperate with. We also are opposed to any steps that seek to undermine its terms of reference. The work of the court is fundamental to fight against impunity for international crimes and as a source of justice for the victims that suffered from them. These are some of the examples of this. The recent Deputy Prosecutor's statement at the United Nations General Assembly. We spoke about progress in the situation in Libya, and this will lead to the first case brought to the court for that situation, and also the sentence against Ali Mohammed Ali Abdurrahman on the 6th of October for committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in Darfur. This is the first time that the condemnation was for gender crimes. Madam President, Spain provides financial support to back up its political support for the court so that it can carry out its duties. Since 2022, we've provided more than 10 million euros in voluntary contributions. This year, our annual contributions are 1.3 million, 500,000 of which will go to the trust fund for the prosecutor's office, another one for complementarity, and then another one for the trust fund for victims. Now, in line with our support for multilingualism as an essential element of multilateralism. This year, we made a 50,000 euro contribution for work that can be translated into, especially case law established by the court, can be translated into Spanish. Now, recently, we've signed a bilateral agreement with the court for executing sentences, and also when it comes to the implementation of Article 8, Paragraph 2 of the statute. It's my honor also to announce that Spain shall present the candidacy of Ana Pedro Llopis to the position of judge at the ICC from 2027 to 2036. Madam President, we would call on all states party to uphold all of their obligations under the Rome Statute, including the arrest warrants that are issued by the court. Ignoring them is something that undermines our trust in the international criminal justice system that we all are seeking. We would also call on others to make sure that we can revise the amendments to the statute so that the crime of aggression can be recognized as falling under the jurisdiction of the court. And we urge all of you to be active participants in the meetings that will take place up to 2029 for this. Madam President, in order to conclude, let me just say once again that Spain will do everything to uphold the independence, the impartiality, and the integrity of the International Criminal Court. We shall also continue to promote the universality of the Rome Statute. The work of the court, the defense of the system that was instituted by the Rome Statute, is indispensable in our fight against impunity, for accountability, and the protection of victims. These are critical elements of justice, peace, and human rights. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your statement, and I will now go floor to Her Excellency Ms. Ana Cristina Rodriguez Pineda, Ambassador of Guatemala to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, representatives of civil society. For Guatemala, it's an honor to participate in this general debate and to express our gratitude to the President, to the judges, and to the Secretary, and to all of the staff of the ICC for their leadership, especially in this environment of rising tensions and external pressures on the multilateral system. Guatemala would like to reiterate its absolute attachment to the independence of the court and the integrity of its judicial proceedings, and in particular when it comes to sanctions and other coercive measures that have impacted the judges and the elected officials. We also are grateful to the work done by the registrar and his staff. They've worked with great professionalism in ensuring business continuity. They've guaranteed the protection of victims and witnesses, and they've made major strides to modernize internal processes, to foster greater digitization, and to provide for IT security. Madam President, the court must be resilient while at the same time remaining efficient. We are encouraged by the fact that despite these attacks against the chambers and the OTP, the court has not ebbed in its workflow. Rather, it's managed to accelerate its proceedings. For example, in the case of Yucatán and Nagasona, the chamber was able to conclude the case in just 6 months, despite the complexity of all of the evidence, and it was also being able to bring together the condemnation and the sentence in one single ruling. Another emblematic case is the Abdelrahman case. It's the first time that somebody has been condemned for gender crimes, and it's the first one coming from the situation in Darfur, and it's also the first sentencing in pursuant to a referral from the Council, the Security Council of the United Nations. We've also been closely following the case against ex-President Rodriguez Duterte, including the recent hearing in the appeals chamber that denied his request for provisional release. This demonstrates that the court continues acting in a spirit of rigor, impartiality, and professionalism. But even though those are achievements, there are still thousands of victims awaiting justice. International crimes continue to be committed. There are still flagrant violations of human rights and violence against women and girls. The court represents a beacon of hope for these people, and this hope can only be sustained if states parties fulfill their obligations. And here, Madam President, allow me to refer to 3 things that we believe the states parties can do to strengthen their support for the court. First, when it comes to the lack of cooperation and failure to execute orders from the court. Cooperation is the very linchpin of the functioning of the court. Without effective support from the states when it comes to executing arrest warrants or protecting witnesses or coordinating apprehensions and evidence, the capacity of the court remains limited. It cannot really fight against impunity. Every time a state fails to arrest people who have been identified as having committed international crimes, well, there are a series of negative impacts. Not only does this undermine the rule of law, but it also fosters repeat offenses. It sheds light on a double standard, and it undermines the very legitimacy of the judicial system. Guatemala shall continue to strengthen its national mechanisms and would call on states parties to fully uphold their commitments. We reiterate the importance of implementing legislation at national level and the signing of the Convention on Privileges and Immunities and the adoption of cooperation agreements whenever necessary. Secondly, when it comes to promoting universality. Now, there are two burdens on the shoulders of each state party. On the one hand, we have to continue fostering the universality of the Rome Statute in order to consolidate a global legal architecture that's uniform when we are seeking to put an end to impunity for the most serious crimes. We need more commitments from the states vis-a-vis the principles and principles adopted in Rome in 1998. And at the same time, we have to do more to ensure that there are fewer denouncements of the Rome Statute. Leaving the ICC is a sovereign decision of the states, but this does not grant anybody permission to undermine the Rome Statute or to commit serious crimes. It's not merely a treaty. This instrument is a multilateral system of justice, of international assistance, and of strengthening national capacity. Guatemala advocates strongly in favor of universality, diversity, and multilingualism in order to have more effective justice. Thirdly, when it comes to sound governance and accountability, we congratulate you, Madam President, and states parties for the work that you've done over the past year. Important measures have been adopted to strengthen oversight and the management of the various organs of the court. We are still concerned by the workplace culture and the well-being of people working for the court. For this, we have to continue strengthening the internal processes for accountability so that the court is truly at the forefront of zero tolerance when it comes to discrimination, harassment, abuse of authority, in a spirit of transparency and impartiality. Madam President, Guatemala has a long-standing and constant commitment to the ICC and to the defense of an international order based on law. The court can count on Guatemala to strengthen cooperation, to protect judicial independence, and promote a system that can provide firm responses to the most serious crimes. We condemn most strongly any type of threat, attack, or pressure on the court, its judges, those that work in the court or with the court. In these challenging times, our union, our political and diplomatic support are more necessary than ever. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Augusto Massari, Ambassador of Italy to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to address the Assembly of the State Parties of the ICC on behalf of the Italian Republic. Italy associates itself with the statement delivered by Denmark as Presidency of the European Union. Madam President, Italy has been a strong supporter of the International Criminal Court since this very creation. It is not a coincidence that the founding treaty of the court was signed in Rome. Our nation is proud that we have given a significant contribution to the advancement of the international criminal law. Under the current geopolitical situation, characterized by coercive measures as well as cyber attacks, Italy reiterates its support to the court. We deem it essential to preserve its resilience and capacity to effectively pursue its institutional mandate. Madam President, we are the fifth largest contributor to the budget of the ICC. Responding to the call from the Court in 2025, we disbursed our national financial contribution already in January to respond to its urgent needs. This year, too, the Court has made a similar request for our national contribution, and we will do so to meet the needs of the ICC. In addition to financial contributions, we are also supporting the Court by having an active role as member of the Bureau, by seconding personnel to the ICC, and by providing training sessions on finance investigation to the personnel of the Office of the Prosecutor, offered by our financial policies, Guardia di Finanza. Italy also supports the Court's investigative efforts, including through the active contribution of the Italian Europol and Eurojust desks to joint investigation teams and other coordinated evidence-gathering activities. Italy, together with other partners and allies, recognizes the relevance of an open, constructive dialogue with non-state parties to prevent further coercive measures and in order to ensure that the Court continues to be effective, sustainable, independent, and impartial as judicial institution. At the entrance of the ICC building, there is an inscription that says, "Building a more just world." While the world may not be just yet, Italy believes in the importance of keeping this process alive. What we have achieved 27 years ago with the Rome Statute is a historical milestone. That is why we need to protect that process launched in Rome. The Court is still a relatively young institution, but we must not understate the results that it has achieved and the effect of deterrence against committing international crimes it provides. Madam President, beyond external threats, the ICC also faces several internal challenges. We acknowledge that a constructive discussion within the ASP membership may help find appropriate ways to strengthen the Court, ensure its resilience, and provide for more effective tools to respond to such challenges. From this point of view, positive results have already been achieved, such as the review of the procedures for internal oversight. We encourage the ASP to pursue a constructive, pragmatic, and result-oriented approach with respect to any other challenge that may be identified, with a view to finding solutions that make the Court stronger and more effective. Addressing these topics openly is not about retreating from the Court's mandate, nor about renegotiating its foundations. Rather, it is about building the conditions for a future in which the Court can operate on a truly universal basis, grounded in broader acceptance and deeper engagement by all states. Madam President, Italy strongly believes in the Court's activities aimed at defending the rights of the victims of the most terrible crimes committed across the world. In this regard, in line with our past commitments, also in 2025, we decided to continue our support for the Trust Fund for Victims with a regular voluntary contribution that we have recently finalized. Finally, Madam President, Italy congratulates you and the Secretariat of the ASP for your engagement in conducting our work these days. I thank you for your attention, Madam Chair.
I thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is Mr. Alexander Kacic, Chief Legal Advisor of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Serbia. You have the floor.
Madam President, members of the Court, distinguished delegates. On behalf of the Republic of Serbia, I would like to emphasize the fundamental importance of strict adherence to the principles and rules of international law governing the jurisdiction and powers of the international courts and tribunals. The International Criminal Court is not yet a court of universal jurisdiction, and its effectiveness and reach depend on the willingness of states to cooperate and accept its jurisdiction. The credibility and effectiveness of international criminal justice depend on strict adherence to the Rome Statute and the rules of customary international law, particularly those concerning the exercise of jurisdiction. In this context, it is necessary to underline that, in order to build trust in the International Criminal Court, the court and its state parties must, inter alia, strictly respect the immunities of non-state parties and their officials in accordance with Article 98 of the Rome Statute. The issuance of confidential arrest warrants against officials of non-state parties, which are then disclosed at press conferences, undermines the credibility of the International Criminal Court. Appeals for unity and full support for the work of the International Criminal Court are meaningful only if the policy of the prosecutor is based on the principle of political neutrality and the strict respect of the Rome Statute and international law. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court holds powers unprecedented in the history of international administration of justice, and these powers must be exercised in accordance with the principles of sound administration of justice. The experience of the Republic of Serbia clearly shows that international criminal justice can function properly only when jurisdictional boundaries are strictly observed. Otherwise, it can be perceived only as a political tool delivering injustice or selective justice. When the proper boundaries of jurisdiction and its exercise are disregarded, the judiciary became politicized, undermining the credibility of the judicial institution. We must be mindful of the fact that establishment and preservation of the integrity, dignity, and credibility of international criminal justice is our common goal, and that all of us must yield to this goal, regardless of the political effect. Only in this way we can contribute to strengthening the still fragile system of international criminal justice and build the International Criminal Court that would be capable of contributing to the preservation of the international peace and security and achievements of other purposes and goals of the Charter of the United Nations. Thanks for your attention.
I thank you for your statement, and I will now give floor to His Excellency Mr. Hector Constant Rosales, Ambassador, Permanent Representative to the OPCW, ICC, and other international organizations and courts of Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. You have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam President. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have come today to this assembly on behalf of the people and government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, presided over by the constitutional president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, and we've come here to alert to as and also to condemn the hegemonic actions against my nation currently threatened by an unprecedented U.S. military dispatch in the Caribbean, which is threatening a peace-loving region. But we also come with a historic responsibility to recognize and raise the alarm as to the dire panorama that we're facing against a moral, legal, and human debt that has been accumulating over the decades against the heroic Palestinian people. We're here to demand that the dimension of horror, impunity, and complicity be acknowledged for what they are and how they are destroying the international justice system. Over 8 decades after the Nuremberg trials, humanity has found itself at a moment that challenges the credibility of international criminal law. In 1945, the world recognized that no military, political, or economic power could lay justice to waste, and it was affirmed at the time that the most serious crimes could not be left at the mercy of geopolitical balance nor diplomatic convenience. And that principle should underlie the ICC, and it's precisely that which is being threatened now with the lamentable return of threats and coercion. We're currently facing one of the deepest crises that has ever occurred since our system was built. And it's not only because of the magnitude of the crimes, but also the very real risk to the rules-based system of international law that is crumbling before our eyes. With the example of Palestine, for example, we're not talking about an isolated incident, but rather a continued process of massive destruction leveled at a civilian population trapped with no means of escape, suffering shelling that has wiped out whole neighborhoods, wiped it off the map along with infrastructure, hospitals, schools, and shelters. And the responsibility underpinning these facts is not abstract. There are clear names that go with it. The Zionist Israel regime, with its topmost leaders who have planned, authorized, and conducted this military operation that is collectively punishing an entire people, meaning that those leaders should be held responsible criminally. There is no legal interpretation that could possibly paint in an acceptable light the deliberate blockage of access to medicine, electricity, food and water to millions of people. There is no argument that can hide the pattern of attacks aimed at civilian targets. No state has the right to undertake illegal military operations with impunity, and no leader has the right to oversee them and then escape the legal consequences that stem therefrom. The ICC was created precisely to take action in circumstances like these, with the magnitude of the damage requiring a strong institutional response. And yet, what we observe is that the court is forced to calculate every step that it takes because it's living in a climate of intimidation without precedent. And this climate is the direct product of sanctions, threats, and political pressure exerted on the OTP against judges so as clearly to prevent them from acting with determination that is called for. Venezuela knows what sanctions what it means to be the victim of sanctions used as an instrument of coercion and political blackmail, even if it leads to the people's sussery. And that's why we know what we're talking about. No institution should aspire to be a serious pillar of international justice if it's going to allow its decisions to be conditioned by external repercussions. It's not enough for the court to offer speeches and declarations of solidarity, given the negative consequences of these unilateral coercive measures. What is needed is a clear pronunciation by the various organs of the court, establishing the punishable nature of these measures and establishing responsibilities in the case, as has been the case with the Venezuela II case referred to the court 6 years ago. As regards the case known as Venezuela I, which we ratified as a process responding to, which responds to the weaponization for political reasons of international justice, we want to reiterate as a sovereign state that Venezuela has the right to undertake its own criminal proceedings without external interference, as per the Rome Statute, in which the complementary nature of the court is enshrined. We also want to express our surprise at the closure of the prosecutor's office in Caracas, which will not sway us from our duty to cooperate. We cannot allow justice to be a weapon of selective domination, maintaining an unacceptable double standard. It benefits the powerful and punishes those who are fighting for their sovereignty, liberty, and independence. Venezuela believes in international law. We believe in justice, and this was true historically with Nuremberg, and it's precisely because we are not renouncing the essence of justice as a basic tenet of peace, and that is why we like to recall the words of Simón Bolívar, and I quote, "Peace shall be my harbor, my glory, my reward, my hope, my joy, and all that is dear to me in this world." Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is Ms. Fabiola Cruz Moreno, Legal Advisor, Second Secretary, Embassy of the Plurinational State of Bolivia to the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Señora Presidenta,
Madam President, dear distinguished delegates of states parties to the Rome Statute, civil society members, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Bolivia, we are honored to take part in this 24th session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute. And we send our fraternal greetings by Political Vice Pereira and the rest of the government to everyone gathered here. We are here to reaffirm our commitment to multilateral rules-based order of peace and justice and the promotion of human dignity as one of the basic tenets of what binds us together. The current context with unprecedented geopolitical context and humanitarian crisis requires an independent, strong and universal court as per the Statute of Rome. And Bolivia, as a signatory to the Rome Statute as of 2002, has ratified the amendment concerning the crime of aggression, and we firmly acknowledge that more work is needed in this regard. We call on all states parties to ratify the agreement on immunities, and we appreciate the ICC's work and recall that its vital functions must go unhindered, such as crimes against humanity, genocide, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. We want to express our recognition of all of the institutional work being done to bolster the effective operations of the court, as well as the preparation for this very assembly. We call on all states parties and anyone respecting international to continue supporting the sport and furthermore, when it comes to cooperation with the court, we once again call on one and all to ensure that there are preventive measures in place to prevent the impunity of any crimes under the jurisdiction of the Rome Statute. Remember that this is a court of last resort, and that the notion of complementarity is of most importance. If the national jurisdictions are able to take steps to prevent or prosecute these crimes, then that is their sovereign right. Bolivia, despite the economic challenges that it's facing and the budgetary pressures that the current government is facing, recognizes the importance of contributing to the program budget of the ICC as a vital measure for ensuring that it continues to fulfill its mandate to the full. My delegation welcomes the measures undertaken by the court when it comes to efficiency and savings. Similarly, Bolivia would like to underscore the importance of ensuring complementarity and gender equality and equitable geographical representation. Multilingualism, gender equality, and a good, healthy workplace are also key elements. Furthermore, Bolivia, as a pacifist country and a country enjoying the rule of law within a rules-based international system, wants to reaffirm its support for the ICC and its fight against impunity. And we call on the court to continue its investigations impartially and independently on the crimes referred to it, and that states, parties or third countries to avoid any efforts to undermine the work of the court and its staff. And in this regard, we wanted to shine a bright light on the need for the diplomatic action to ensure that people working with the court or cooperating with the court be free of any pressures. That is why it's so important to ratify the ICC's agreement on privileges and immunities. Bolivia also wanted to express its firm reiteration of commitment to strengthening all of the organs of international justice, including the ICC, but also the broader multilateral rules-based system. We would like to respectfully request all states parties to continue fulfilling their commitments under the Rome Statute to ensure sustainable carriage of justice. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your statement. Et maintenant, je donne la parole.
And now I should like to give the floor to Mr. Taylor Lubanga, chargé de mission of the head of state of the Democratic Republic of Congo. You have the floor, sir.
Excellence, Prévé Kokurante, Président de
Your Excellency, Madame Paevi Kaukurante, President of the ASP, Honorable Tomoko Akane, President of the ICC, Honorable Mame Mende Nyang, Deputy Prosecutor of the ICC, Ms. Nashat Shamim Khan, Deputy Prosecutor of the ICC, Mr. Gilazar Osvaldo, Registrar, dear delegations, ladies and gentlemen. My country is one of the many states parties who would like to underscore the quality of the leadership shown by the President of our sessions here at the Assembly of States Parties. This 24th session of our Assembly is being held in a multi-crisis context, with sanctions being leveled against personnel of the ICC, but also with the revision of the Rome Statute being also on the table. This is a key moment for humanity, with armed conflicts, acts of aggression, humanitarian crises, environmental crises, human lives are being struck down, there are displaced persons, refugees, peace around the world is under threat. And against this backdrop, I would be remiss if I failed to mention the acts being committed in the east of my own country, as well as the aggression for which Rwanda has been condemned by resolution of the Security Council 2773 in February of earlier this year. It's no exaggeration, following analysis of legal experts, to talk of a veritable humanitarian disaster. And all of this means that the ICC is of more necessity than ever. It goes without saying that that the court is all the more important and deserves the support of all stakeholders against this almost unbridled rise in violence with its tragic human consequences. It's necessary for all stakeholders to preserve the court's universality through cooperation and complementarity. To overcome these challenges, the court has to have the appropriate financial wherewithal. And we know that the court will only be able to fulfill its mission if it has its elected officials free of pressure from outside. We call for the lifting of any sanctions against such elected officials. Over and above supporting the court and its staff, we also recommend dialogue with the court and its multilateral and bilateral partners, contributing to the restoration of trust and independence. since there is such a huge list of acts of aggression in the east of my country, with Rwandan troops and rebellions in the east causing so many troubles, it is of great importance that the investigations be carried out, even though there is certain frustration at the lengthy nature of such investigations. Let us not forget that the dispatch of teams of investigators, including in high-risk areas, is going ahead. So there are some who would call for these investigations to be sped up, again, so that the perpetrators of these of current crimes and unfolding crimes and those already committed be dealt with swiftly. Professor Celestine Hilaire said that in criminal psychology, opening proceedings, and in this case international proceedings, actually plays a pedagogical role that weighs on criminals and their accomplices. And it's our duty to remind the court that it needs to accord urgent priority to the investigations in the Eastern DRC. In parallel to the investigations by the OTPs, my country has also been fighting its own battle against impunity, and this is at the heart of our system of governance, and that is why we have transposed certain elements of the Rome Statute of the ICC and our Congolese military code into national law. Recently, His Excellency Félix-Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, taking the floor at the 52nd session of the Council of Human Rights in February in 2003 in Geneva, called for the support of partners so as to set up a special criminal court for the DRC so as to handle crimes already committed in the DRC and ongoing crimes in my country. This is perhaps the right time to thank the OTP and its staff for the support that they have lent to this idea. And the discussions for the Special Criminal Court are currently ongoing, and we hope that this hybrid mechanism will be set up before too long. It's also perhaps the right time to welcome the initiative put forward by Vanuatu, Fiji, and Samoa so as to recognize ecocide as a separate international crime. Indeed, the aggression that my country is suffering is actually also an ecological war. Deforesting certain protected areas, threatening our peatlands, and that is why de lege ferenda, as the crime of ecocide, could be listed as an international separate crime, which would mean revising Article 5 of the Rome Statute. And it is this is why we support the revision process for the amendments concerning the crimes of aggression and eliminate any legal and jurisdictional limits. It is the very values enshrined in the Rome Statute that lead us to make these statements. And that is why we would like to ask any countries, any states parties that have announced their imminent withdrawal from the Rome Statute to kindly reconsider. This is the only instance that can do the work it is doing. We also wanted to extend our thanks to the Registrar for the excellent organization of this session. And thank you, Madam President, to you and to all of your staff for the quality of the reports that we have received. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Nelly Saroyan, Head of Department of Treaties and International Law, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia. You have the floor.
Thank you. Madam President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to address this assembly on behalf of the Republic of Armenia. First and foremost, I would like to reaffirm Armenia's unwavering commitment to the principles and values outlined in the Rome Statute. We share a common goal of ensuring accountability for the gravest crimes of concern to the international community: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression. These principles are deeply rooted in our collective memory and legal conviction. The history of humankind over thousands of years has logically led to the creation of the International Criminal Court. The ICC is not only a court of last resort, it is a reminder that legality, not power, must be the organizing principle of international life. Our membership is in many ways a message both to our own people and to the international community. It signals our conviction that justice, however delayed, must never be denied, and that even small states have agency in shaping the global legal order, and that legal institutions can and must serve as pillars of stability. Madam President, as we come together for the 23rd session of this Assembly, we do so in a landscape that still presents challenges to the rules-based international framework. However, despite these challenges, the Court has continued to carry out its responsibilities with diligence, impartiality, and remarkable resilience. Armenia believes that our joint commitment to the Court is both a legal obligation and a matter of fundamental commitment to the structure of international justice. As such, we remain firmly committed to supporting the Court in carrying out its mandate, with the view for achieving consistent and equitable access to justice for all under the system of the Rome Statute. In implementing this imperative, Armenia completely follows the fundamental principle that the ICC must remain impartial and free from political interference and external pressure. Excellencies, after the ratification of the statute, Armenia as a state party reiterates its firm commitment to strengthening its national implementation framework and to upholding the values of international criminal justice. In this context, Armenia is proceeding with the adoption of comprehensive national legislation regulating all aspects of cooperation with the International Criminal Court in full conformity with the obligations arising under the Rome Statute. In addition, Armenia is actively engaged in negotiations and preparatory work toward the conclusion of voluntary cooperation agreements aimed at further enhancing its capacity to fulfill cooperation obligations and to support the Court's mandate. Ladies and gentlemen, let us therefore use this session not only to reaffirm our support, but also to translate it into concrete actions that protect the Court, strengthen the Rome Statute system, and advance the cause of justice. Armenia remains committed to working with all state parties and with the Court to uphold international law and to defend the rule of law. The pursuit of justice is not merely a responsibility to the past, but an investment in a peaceful future. I would like to conclude this speech with the words of famous American lawyer Benjamin Ferencz. There can be no peace without justice, no justice without law, and no law without a court to decide what is just. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And I will now give floor to His Excellency Eros Gasperoni, Ambassador of San Marino to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. San Marino has aligned itself with the statement delivered by the Danish Presidency of the European Union. However, I would like to highlight some issues which are particularly relevant for my country. It is with a deep sense of concern that I address today this Assembly in The Hague. After several years of absence due to our limited administrative capacity, my country could not miss this annual event again in such a particularly delicate, volatile, and dangerous moment in history and global geopolitical context. This is true especially for small-sized states, which, for their defense and survival, cannot resort to the force of weapons and armies, but can only rely on and hope for the maintenance and strengthening of a rule-based international order. Over the past year, threats and attacks against the International Criminal Court have increased exponentially, and almost no one could have imagined that the court would one day be targeted by sanctions usually designed and directed against individuals and entities engaged in illegal, criminal and terrorist activities. San Marino deplores any form of sanction imposed on the court and its officials. The court is a cornerstone in the construction of a more just, peaceful and democratic world, an instrument of international justice that finds its legal basis in the Charter of the United Nations and in international human rights conventions, whose establishment represents one of the most extraordinary and revolutionary advances for our legal civilization. International law is either respected or violated. The alternative to the ICC and the multilateral system is the law of the strongest, the rule of lawlessness, arbitrariness, and impunity, and the systematic violation of fundamental human rights, freedoms, and democracy. Those who reject the centrality of law and the authority of the institutions protecting it place themselves outside the international legal order and at the head of a hierarchical international order where the might is right principle prevails. San Marino believed in the merits of the project for the creation of the ICC from the outset, as a result of the mobilization of many citizens and civil society organizations, which in 1995 gave rise to an international coalition in as many as 150 countries. The aim was to establish the first and only permanent, independent, impartial, fair, and effective international jurisdiction with the power to judge individuals responsible for the most serious international crimes. San Marino demonstrated this by ratifying the Rome Statute very quickly back in July 1999. It was the third country overall to do so, and the first European country. The spirit in which we sit here today has not changed, in the awareness that only by observing the rules of international law can peace be maintained everywhere. We therefore warmly welcome Ukraine's accession as the 125th state party to the Rome Statute and are dismayed by the decision of those countries that have expressed their intention to withdraw from the statute, thereby rejecting the authority and jurisdiction of the court. Unlike these countries, we believe that the court's jurisdiction should not only be defended, but also expanded and harmonized to fully encompass the horrific crime of aggression, a goal that unfortunately could not be achieved during the special session of the Assembly last July, where we decided that victims of crimes of aggression can wait until 2029 to hope to see their rights recognized. We even like to dream that the court's jurisdiction may one day include the investigation and cessation of crimes consisting of systemic violations of fundamental rights or assets which are not yet covered by criminal law, such as the production and trade of weapons. Madam President, San Marino strongly believes in the mission of the court and intends to continue to stand on the side of international law and not on the side of those who reject any authority above the state, act unilaterally and refuse to comply with those international rules that their predecessors, in the aftermath of the Second World War, laid down as the foundation of the international order to save future generations from the scourge of war. Today, ongoing wars worldwide risk obliterating jus in bello and becoming, with the spread of digital technology on the battlefield, bellum internecinum. International law must apply to everyone, and it is the law that must exercise control over political power. If the opposite were true, it would be the end of democracy, rule of law, and multilateralism. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement, And the next speaker is His Excellency Ammar Hiyachi, Permanent Representative of the State of Palestine to international organizations in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me at the beginning to extend our appreciation for your leadership and admiration for the way you are steering our work at these turbulent times. Thank you very much. Our appreciation also goes to the personnel of the court for their courageous and dedication to the work of the court, including the leadership of the court. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we meet at a time when prosecutors and judges are sanctioned and war criminals are shielded. At a time when victims of atrocity crimes are denied the justice they owed. While red carpets are rolled out for wanted criminals and while the atrocities they committed are hailed as victory. Today, civil society organizations are punished for documenting crimes and cooperating with the court. This surreal reality poses an existential threat to the court. More broadly, it confronts humanity with a decisive choice between our aspirations for international justice and utter lawlessness and impunity. How we act today will determine which way the arc of history bends. That is why we cannot afford ambiguity, indecision, or submission to threats. Madam President, protecting the court and its independence, impartiality, and integrity is not optional. As state parties, we are duty-bound to adopt clear and effective measures to protect the court, those who work in it, the judges that presides over the cases, and those who cooperate with them. This is elemental. We must stand united against sanctions and put an end to this travesty. We must also stand up for the rights of victims, all victims, under the jurisdiction of the court to justice without selectivity or double standards, including Palestinian victims. The State of Palestine is open for constructive dialogue. In this regard, allow me to remind of the obvious. There is difference between dialogue and extortion. If the Rome Statute and the ICC are to survive this unprecedented assault, then we must be unwavering in our defense, not looking for an easy way out that harms the court. The only way for this international mechanism of justice to survive is by ensuring its independence and protecting its ability to seek justice for all under its mandate without fear or favor. Certainly, this cannot be achieved by statements like the ones we heard here that grants immunity under which the Rome Statute does not grant it or the jurisprudence of the court does not give it. Madam President, the ongoing independent investigations in the situation in the State of Palestine and compliance by state parties of their obligations under the Rome Statute have exposed deficits in integrity and commitment. But let there be no doubt, failing the litmus test that this Palestine case presents will irreversibly compromise, if not completely derail, this mechanism. No state, however powerful it is, has the right to position itself as a stick-wielding enforcer of the world order, arrogating to itself the right to determine how, when, and who and whom the law should be enforced. And no victims, no matter their skin color or faith, nationality should be denied justice. Madam President, the arrest warrants issued by the court against Israel's Prime Minister and former ministers of defense are the beginning of a path to end Israel's impunity. The court applied the facts and the law. It did its part to hold perpetrators accountable. It is not their identity that brings them before the court, but their boundless criminality televised for all to witness, criminality announced in their statements, written in their policies, filmed by their soldiers, and committed against entire people. The arrest warrants challenged and entrenched Israeli exceptionalism and a Palestinian exception, where impunity was entrenched and accountability was forever denied. Madam President, I want to conclude my remarks from this podium by saluting Palestinian civil society. Despite crippling sanctions, attacks, assassinations, they continue to cooperate with the court, the victims, and witnesses. They do so with inspiring bravery, nobility, and commitment to the rights and dignity of the victims as well as the rule of law. Sanctioning Palestinian civil society is an act of political cruelty that endangers the lives of human rights defenders and denies victims access to the court. We call on the court and all states parties to support and protect Palestinian civil society and ensure access of victims to justice. This is the heart of our mandate, and we must not shy away from our responsibility. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement, and I will now give floor to Mr. Diego Sadovski, Chargé d'Affaires of Argentina to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. It's an honor to represent the Republic of Argentina at the Assembly in an international environment that requires innovative and prompt responses to the challenges that international criminal justice is facing across the globe. My country stands firmly against those who perpetrate such crimes. They should be brought to justice on the basis of the court's independence, impartiality, and integrity. In November 2024, we saw the conclusion of the preliminary investigation into the situation in Venezuela. But since that time, not much progress has been made. Arbitrary detentions, inhumane treatment, and other crimes against humanity committed by the Venezuelan regime requires rigorous and expeditious orders from the court, and in particular issuing arrest warrants for those responsible for this. This stands in contrast to the situation that we've seen in Palestine. That investigation was started the same year, with arrest warrants being issued in 2024 against high-ranking Israeli officials. Argentina respects the independence of the courts, but we believe that it should take a sounder approach and look at the context in which Israel is exercising its legitimate right to defend itself against terrorist organizations. Also, we should be mindful of Article 98 of the statute, which states that the court shall not give out any requests for people to be apprehended that are counter to the presentation of evidence under international law. And on the 17th of November, we have submitted a paper on this, and we hope that people will give it due consideration. The legality and the work of the International Criminal Court and its legitimacy depend on strict adherence to the Rome Statute. States party make their own interpretation of that on the basis of the context, the preparatory work, the text itself, and the participation of the states parties. This includes provisions such as Article 98 and Article 7.3 on the definitions of gender. We would urge that this Assembly to look into these interests to make sure that we can come up with a common interpretation of the statute and make further steps towards its universality. Argentina would like to formally go on record in stating its position on these questions when it comes to the adoption of the various resolutions. The problems that the court is traversing is rooted in the fact that we states parties haven't really made it clear that what we need is a court that's truly independent. We should not interfere in its decisions with budgetary strings attached or any other type of mechanism. It behooves us all to recall how this court strayed from the normal practice to elect the prosecutor when the outcome was different from what it was expected to be, or states parties and their attitude towards acting and executing arrest warrants issued by the court depending on the situation. If there are rules, we have to respect them in their entirety, rigorously, avoiding double standards and anything that could give rise to doubting the judicial process. Argentina is firmly committed to the Rome Statute and shall support the efforts of the ICC to investigate and to punish those who are responsible for these acts with great rigor. But we also defend the right of all democratic societies to protect themselves against existential threats and to guarantee the security of their citizens. And both of these are not mutually incompatible. But by having sound results that take into account all of the complexities of each and every case individually, it's only in that way that we will be able to enhance the confidence in this institution and abide by the principles that saw it come to light. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Maintenant, je donne la...
I shall now give the floor to Madam Annette Andre Onanga, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Gabon to the United Nations. Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me begin by congratulating you once again on behalf of my country on the able manner in which you are presiding over this assembly over the past year. And this, in a time of great challenges, we encourage you to continue with all of your efforts to make sure that criminal justice in all of its forms can flourish around the world and that the capacity of the court can be enhanced as well. I would stress that the fight against impunity remains a top priority for the international community. This is clearly stated in the very preamble of the Rome Statute. This is why international criminal justice, criminal law, and its corollary, fighting against impunity, must always be the bedrock of legitimacy of our court. Gabon, at the outset, would like to state that despite the many perhaps delicate issues that it's faced since its founding when it comes to difficulties perhaps in execution of arrest warrants or prosecuting certain alleged alleged criminals, it remains a cornerstone of international justice. Without a standing court like the ICC, the commitments that we've made to strengthen criminal justice would be nothing more than mere words. And my country would like to reaffirm here and now that we are deeply attached to the Rome Statute and the promotion of the rule of law. We also have a firm determination to fight against impunity. This is a principle that we cannot compromise. Madam President, the principle of complementarity between the court and national jurisdictions is something that's set forth at the very beginning of the Rome Statute, and it constitutes a major innovation when it comes to criminal justice. Why? Because it makes it possible for states to exercise their sovereignty as the first custodians of national and international law. And this approach can fully take into consideration some of the complexities in certain situations because of the broad scope, geographical scope of the court's work. and its role as the court of last resort. Now, we are very pleased to see that of the many cases submitted to the ICC over the past few years, they reflect the growing interest of states parties to the Rome Statute, bringing the international community's attention to matters related to serious crimes for which national jurisdictions, generally speaking, are powerless to address or inadequately prepared to do so. Madam President, efforts to put an end to impunity requires also that the judges sitting at the court carry out their judicial work in good conditions, without intimidation, without threats, having all of the necessary elements for them to carry out impartial investigations. The ICC reflects the world itself, and it's therefore a work in progress. The progress that we have made, the hesitations we've had, some of the shortcomings are just part of the struggle for us to make sure that international justice can prevail based through national policies. So we must do everything that we can to avoid losing sight of the very raison d'etre of this entire endeavor. We seek to preserve the dignity of life by pushing ever further forward the confines of areas where there is no impunity. We would reiterate our support to the ICC and urge the court to carry out its work in full impartiality. Thank you very much for your attention.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you.
The next speaker will be His Excellency Oro Tevi, Ambassador, Permanent Representative to the United Nations of Vanuatu. You have the floor.
Madam President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Vanuatu is proud to be here to address this esteemed assembly. Vanuatu reiterates our unwavering commitment to the International Criminal Court and the values it seeks to enforce. We are proud to have engaged in various recent efforts to promote the strength and implementation of the Rome Statute. Notably, in April this year, we were one of the 5 countries that submitted an amendment to the UN Secretary General to harmonize the ICC's jurisdiction over the crime of aggression in line with existing core crimes. We reiterate our gratitude to all state parties for their collaboration to reach consensus at the special session this July, and note our ongoing support for this critical conversation in the run-up to 2029. We are also grateful to continue our mandate as the Asia-Pacific's regional focal point on matters of non-cooperation with the Rome Statute, reflecting our commitment to promoting the perspective of small islands within the international criminal law. As a highly climate-vulnerable nation, Vanuatu also observes with gratitude the Court's ongoing attention to the centrality of environmental crimes and harms to the commission of existing crimes under the Rome Statute, particularly in the light of the ICJ advisory opinion on climate change. We note that the links between environmental damage and grave violations of human rights have never been more apparent. We therefore take this moment to underscore our commitment to promoting ecocide as the 5th independent crime under the Rome Statute, both in times of conflict and times of peace. We thank the nations of Fiji, Samoa, and the Democratic Republic of Congo for their public support of our amendment proposal to the Rome Statute, and invite all interested delegations to explore this matter further with us. Madam President, In closing, let me highlight that Vanuatu continues to observe threats and sanctions against the court and its officials with great concern. Particularly for small states, the ICC, our court, must be able to fulfill its role in maintaining international peace and security. We urge all states parties to recognize the importance and the potential of the Rome Statute, both as it stands as it may evolve. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. We have now concluded the statements by states parties representatives. I thank all those speakers for their statements and support pledged for the court. I do recognize that Venezuela has requested the floor, so I will now give the floor to the representative of Venezuela.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I do understand that this is the moment that I'm to take the floor and rebut categorically everything that was leveled at my country by the country under the government of Milei. Milei's government is not in a position to make statements such as it made in press conferences. We don't accept its position as a false defender of the rule of law when you look at one of the situations with the worst genocides ongoing in the world. And in any case, Venezuela naturally, as we said in our intervention, we trust in the impartiality of the mandate of the court, and then we invite any delegation, but in particular Argentina, to take due note of what has been said by the UN body against torture, in which they undertook investigations that the Argentinian government has refused to acknowledge, and therefore, under the Argentinian dictatorship, and in the case of respecting memory and ensuring reparations for victims, we are always standing ready to support the work of this court and entity to fight against impunity. Venezuela, therefore, would like to also demand respect for the authority bound therein. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and I give floor to Argentina.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We just wanted to acknowledge the statement made by Venezuela, and we stand firmly by everything that we said in our national statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and the State of Palestine has requested for the floor. You have the...
Thank you, Madam President. I'm taking the floor to exercise our right of reply in response to the statement made by the Argentinian representative in their national statement. We find that incredibly incredulous and frankly risible that the Argentinian delegate started their statement with, and I quote, "My country stands firmly against those who commit crimes," while in the same breath reject the court's independent investigation and decisions in the situation in the state of Palestine, risking compromising the impartiality and integrity of the judicial process for their own political calculations, and essentially denying justice to millions of Palestinian victims. Are we to understand that the Argentinian delegate, as they claimed, or Argentina, stands firmly against those who commit crimes, except those that are committed by their allies? There is no way to describe what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip other than crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And the Argentinian representative requested that the court takes into consideration the context, between quotes, in which Israel is committing its crimes. But we can share the context The context is colonial erasure, illegal occupation, 77 years of ethnic cleansing, genocide, apartheid, all crimes that one can imagine, torture and rape. Argentina also speaks of the so-called right of self-defense by Israel. If the Argentinian delegate can point us towards the provisions in the Rome Statute that they say that states have rights to commit genocides, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, under which law, in which circumstance Israel has the right to kill over 20,000 children at a rate of 1 child an hour, an average of 30 children a day for over 740 days? Why is Argentina justifying the mass slaughter of a people? To justify the worst crimes in modern times under the pretext of self-defense is an insult not just to the millions of Palestinian victims, but to the Rome Statute and its promise of never again. We recall that as a state party, Argentina has accepted the jurisdiction of the court and thus has an obligation to execute the arrest warrants in the situation in the state of Palestine. And no amount of politicized statements will absolve Argentina of its obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have one more request of reply. I give the floor to Argentina.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We are taking the floor again, and thank you for giving us the floor again, because as one of the founding members of this court and an active cooperating member, we wish to associate ourselves with the Palestinian state, but we ratify fully and in its entirety the declaration that we had just made in our national statement a moment ago. Thank you.
I thank you. I give the last time floor to State of Palestine. Please be brief, as we would need to continue our list of speakers then.
Thank you, Madam President. Argentina said that they are a founding member of the court, but somehow they needed to be reminded of their obligations under the Rome Statute. Thank you.
I thank you. And now I would refer that on the basis of previous Assembly decisions, the Bureau recommended that the Assembly allocate 45 minutes for the participation in the general debate of observers pursuant to Rule 92 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly. And we will start with the statement by Mr. He Liang, legal advisor of the Embassy to the Kingdom of the Netherlands of the People's Republic of China. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, I have the privilege to address this Assembly on behalf of the Chinese observer delegation. At present, the international landscape is marked by transformation and turbulence, with regional conflicts and turmoil protracting and spilling over. Against this backdrop, the International Criminal Court is facing a growing number of situations and cases, many of which are intricate and sensitive in nature. The international community watches closely what steps the ICC would take to address the challenges, to perform its duties impartially and objectively, and to handle the situations and cases appropriately. China, being a country suffered from atrocities during the Second World War, consistently supports the global efforts in preventing and punishing the most serious crimes in accordance with law. Such support dates back to almost 80 years ago, when China actively participated in and contributed to the work of the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, also known as the Tokyo Trial. China took part in negotiating the Rome Statute and has been paying close attention to the work of the ICC since its establishment. It is China's persistent proposition that the ICC strictly abides by the mandate conferred by the Rome Statute. To be more specific, we expect the Court to interpret and apply the Rome Statute and the general international law in a coherent manner and in good faith, and to fully comply with the principles of complementarity and international cooperation. Jurisdiction over nationals of non-state parties must not be arbitrarily established or exercised. Furthermore, there can be no place for politicization, selectivity, or double standards in the ICC's work. Independence and impartiality are, as the President of the Court put it, the polar stars of the Court, and should be upheld throughout the investigation, prosecution, and adjudication. By doing so, the ICC would be better poised to play a constructive role in upholding justice and maintaining peace and stability. Madam President, the ICC's approach to immunities of state officials has long been a source of controversy, legally and politically. Although ending impunity is a legitimate goal of the Court, it is established principle under customary international law that sitting heads of states and governments, foreign ministers, and other high-ranking officials enjoy absolute immunities from criminal jurisdiction as well as inviolability. Article 27 of the Rome Statute, although interpreted as excluding the application of such immunities, is binding only on states parties. And it is noteworthy that provided by the Vienna Convention on the law of treaties, treaties do not create obligations or rights for third parties. Neither Article 27 nor any other articles of the Rome Statute alters the states parties' obligation to respect immunity under general international law. In July of this year, a special session of the Assembly of States Parties was held to review the amendments on the crime of aggression. China notes the differing views expressed regarding the expansion of the Court's jurisdiction over the crime of aggression. China wishes to reiterate that the issue of the crime of aggression is intrinsically linked to international peace and security. The Charter of the UN has tasked the Security Council with the primary responsibility of maintaining international peace and security, including the responsibility and authority in determining the existence of acts of aggression. Therefore, utmost caution should be taken in amending the Rome Statute and exercising the Court's jurisdiction, so that the mandate of the Security Council remains intact and the sovereignty and jurisdiction of non-state parties be fully respected. Madam President, China has listened to the previous interventions carefully and notes the concern expressed on repeated imposition of unilateral sanctions by one state against the judges and prosecutors of the ICC. China persistently opposes and condemns unilateral sanctions that violate international law. Imposing such sanctions are essentially placing individual states' own will and domestic laws above international law and are detrimental to the international legal order. In conclusion, trust and support can only be earned through concrete actions. China hopes the International Criminal Court will maintain an objective and just position, actively respond to the concerns of states, and play a positive role in safeguarding fairness and justice and promoting peace and security. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you, and I will give floor to His Excellency Abbas Pakpour Ardegani, Director General for International Legal Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me begin by extending my delegation's sincere appreciation to you, Madam President, to preside over this session of the Assembly in an efficient manner. Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. The Islamic Republic of Iran attaches great importance to fighting impunity and effective prosecution of perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole. The ICC functions consistent with the principle of complementarity so as to avoid overextension into matters that can be adequately addressed by national jurisdictions. During the past year, the draft legislation on international crimes was finalized and submitted by the Iranian government to the parliament for its consideration and adoption. Although crimes under the court's jurisdiction have already been prosecutable under existing Iranian laws and regulations, the new draft law is aimed at setting up a specialized framework for prosecution of genocide, crime against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Madam President, the current global landscape presents intensifying challenges that demand the court's vigilant and punctual response. As an alarming sui generis situation, the atrocities committed against the Palestinian people continue to outrage the conscience of humanity. Today, there has not remained doubt regarding the commission of genocide. The actus reus and mens rea of this crime are evident, and the special intent is manifest given the official policies and statements of the Israeli criminals, in particular during the past 2 years in Gaza. It is, however, disappointing that so far the genocidal acts committed against the Palestinian people have not been the subject of a thorough investigation by the court. Amidst this, it is ironic that certain state parties to the Rome Statute refrain from cooperating with the court and have declared that they would not comply with the court's arrest warrant. Such illegal approach contributes to normalization of impunity for crimes under the court's jurisdiction and further breed the banality of evil. Madam President, emboldened by impunity, the Israeli regime and the United States launched a war of aggression against Iran in June 2025 and deliberately targeted civilians and civilian objects in commission of war crimes. These assaults resulted in the martyrdom of more than 1,000 individuals, including 200 women and children, and injured thousands more. The individual criminal responsibility of all those engaged for directing deliberate attacks against civilians, including women and children, scientists, university professors, journalists, and prisoners, among others, launching willful attacks against civilian objects, in particular hospitals and ambulances, and energy infrastructure, including peaceful nuclear facilities, has therefore been established. Likewise, all those involved in commanding, ordering, committing, or aiding, abetting, and otherwise assisting in the commission of the aforementioned war crimes bear the same individual criminal responsibility. Against this backdrop, as a victim of the crime of aggression, the Islamic Republic of Iran closely follows up the efforts aimed at amending the conditions regarding the application of the court's jurisdiction with regard to the crime of aggression. Madam President, the independence and impartiality of the court, its judges and staff, and the exercise of their functions free from undue influence or external threats are essential for the administration of justice. We fully understand the pressure placed on the court by way of unilateral coercive measures against fundamental principles of international law. In my country, countless civilians, including patients, have been deprived of medicine and other essential items and services due to pervasive unilateral coercive measures. Since such measures are imposed on a large scale, directed against a civilian population, and are carried out with a clear state policy, they are tantamount to the crime against humanity. To conclude, Madam President, we stand at a critical juncture. Unilateralism and normalization of international crimes sadly prevail over efforts geared toward bringing criminals to justice. Let us allow no room for impunity and ensure that genociders and aggressors fail in their agenda. To that end, we must work together and spare no effort to build an environment conducive to the realization of peace and tranquility for our children and our next generation. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your remarks, and next speaker is Her Excellency Eva Jelena Silva Walker, Ambassador of Cuba to the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Señora Presidenta.
Madam President, my delegation thanks you for being able to take the floor in this 24th session of the Assembly of States Parties of the International Criminal Court. And we wanted to underscore Cuba's strict commitment to the fight against impunity and the crimes affecting the international community. All nations are facing growing challenges and multi-dimensional conflicts that threaten peace and security internationally. The flagrant violation of international humanitarian law and the genocide that is being perpetuated against the Palestinian population in Gaza is clear proof that what is urgently needed is a truly independent international jurisdictional institution that can help guarantee that there will be no impunity against when it comes to these most serious crimes. Cuba maintains its serious reserves about the excessive and unjustified faculties entrusted to the UN Security Council by virtue of Article 16 of the Rome Statute concerning the work of the ICC. These faculties stop this court from being the truly independent institution that it ought to be. And as a result, not only does this entity lose its very jurisdictional essence, it also means the loss of the key principle of independence of its jurisdictional organs and the transparency and impartiality in its administration of justice. It's imperative that there be respect at all times for the principle of law regarding the consent of a state to submit to the provisions of a treaty endorsed in Article 11 of the Vienna Convention on the Right of Treaties, on Law of Treaties, 23rd of May 1969, which is broadly recognized by states parties. We recall that the ICC's jurisdiction should remain independent of the political organs of the UN and operate in a complementary manner to national criminal jurisdictions. The Statute of Rome was not created to replace national courts. That would have been to undermine states' sovereignty. According to the definition of crime of aggression adopted at the Kampala conference, Cuba holds that it is incomplete, this definition, and lacks several elements of importance that need to be incorporated therein. It's too generic and it needs to encompass all forms of aggression that raise their ugly head in international relations between states, and not only look at armed force or armed threats, but also other aspects that affect a state's sovereignty, such as territorial integrity or political independence. Cuba reiterates its willingness to keep participating in the negotiations concerning the ICC, including the report of the ICC that every year is discussed and adopted by the Assembly, as well as to follow up on the ongoing proceedings. By way of conclusion, we reaffirm our country's position that we feel that a true international criminal jurisdiction needs to be created that is impartial, non-selective, effective, fair, and complementary to national justice systems, truly independent and free of pressures from external political interests that could pervert its very essence. We will never cease to act with firmness and in a manner consistent with the principles of transparency, independence, and impartiality. We shall abide by the unfettered application of and respect for international law. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement, and we will now proceed with statements by international organizations and other entities. And our first speaker is Ms. Paola Forgione, Legal Advisor of the International Committee of the Red Cross. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the 19th century, the International Committee of the Red Cross started advocating for the creation of an international court to prosecute individuals for war crimes. Already at that time, it was clear that ensuring respect for the newly adopted adopted 1864 Geneva Convention was a responsibility which could not be borne exclusively by domestic legislators and courts. In a publication of 1872, we first tried to conceptualize the principle of complementarity. Because of our long-standing belief in the importance of an international mechanism to ensure accountability for war crimes, in 1998 we warmly welcomed the signature of the Rome Statute. Over the past 27 years, we have stood alongside states in their efforts to ratify and to give effect to the Rome Statute within their domestic legal systems. Our support has taken many forms. For example, we have provided legal advice to lawmakers and we have contributed to the development of a model law for the national implementation of the Rome Statute. This work continues today as we remain committed to assisting states in strengthening their legal frameworks in line with the Rome Statute. Today, the delegates of the International Committee of the Red Cross witness horrifying violations of international humanitarian law while working in the more than 130 conflicts that are currently occurring around the world. But we also witness a new and concerning phenomenon. Certain states have withdrawn or are signaling the intention to withdraw from some of the treaties which strengthen the protection of both civilians and combatants in armed conflicts, in particular disarmament treaties and the Rome Statute. These treaties were specifically designed to prevent and punish violations of international humanitarian law. Withdrawing from such treaties means undermining decades of global efforts, of negotiations, of a shared vision towards a more humane world. Withdrawals undermine the fight against impunity and risk normalizing serious violations of international humanitarian law. At this time of acute international tensions and during this very trying moment for international justice, states must uphold and not weaken their obligations to prevent and punish serious violations of international humanitarian law. In the same spirit, we must all seize the momentum of the 24th Assembly of State Parties to redouble our efforts to promote the universal adherence to the Rome Statute. The International Committee of the Red Cross calls on all states to recommit strongly and visibly to the Rome Statute and to make it clear that their commitment is unwavering. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your remarks. And the next speaker is Mr. Vaios Koutroulis, representing International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Let me express my gratitude to the Assembly of the States Parties for inviting the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission to attend the travaux of the Assembly and for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. Establishing individual criminal responsibility for grave breaches and other serious violations of international humanitarian law is among the key methods of ensuring accountability for violations of this law. But it is not the only one. Among the means of ensuring compliance with humanitarian law are also inquiries, fact-finding, and good offices. In the age of disinformation, misinformation, and fake news, a proper establishment of facts is more necessary than ever. And this is precisely what our Commission does. The Commission is established under Article 90 of the first protocol additional to the Geneva Conventions. We are neither an organ of the United Nations nor of any other international or regional organizations. We are created by states, states parties to the first additional protocol, and our competence is based on states' consent. This consent so far has been expressed by 78 states, the majority of which are states parties to the ICC statute. We are an impartial, independent, non-political organization composed of 15 experts with different backgrounds, medical doctors, diplomats, lawyers, military officers, acting in their personal capacities, who are able to undertake inquiries regarding IHL violations. We are a permanent organ, predictable, and ready to undertake a mission at a short notice, contrary to other ad hoc bodies. And last but not least, our confidential, flexible procedures can be shaped depending on circumstances and have the advantage of a low-key, non-confrontational approach. The Commission has proven its worth. First, in 2017, at the request of the OSCE, it undertook a mission in eastern Ukraine to conduct an independent forensic investigation on an incident involving the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission there. Second, in 2024, at the request of Poland, the Commission fulfilled the Good Office's mandate with respect to an incident in the Gaza Strip of which the NGO World Central Kitchen was a victim. Madam President, implementation of international humanitarian law depends on political will. Adhering to the Rome Statute and accepting the jurisdiction of the court for the most serious international crimes, among which war crimes, is of course proof of such will. The will, in the words of the preamble, to put an end to impunity and thus contribute to the prevention of core international crimes. The International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission gives you an additional complementary avenue towards what is in essence the same goal, contributing to the prevention of violations of humanitarian law. And these violations lie, of course, at the heart of war crimes. 55 states parties to the Rome Statute are also parties to the first additional protocol, but have not yet recognized the competence of the Commission. We would like to encourage them to consider such recognition. And we would also like to remind to all states, even those that are not parties to the first additional protocol, that they can use the Commission's good offices and fact-finding services on an ad hoc basis, with the advantages described above. In times of recurring humanitarian law violations, it is time to prove your commitment to ensuring respect for IHL and your support to the mechanisms which do ensure its respect and implementation. And one strong way of doing so is by recognizing the competence of the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission and using its many capabilities. Thank you for your attention.
I thank you for your statement. And as per the decision by the Bureau dated 5th of November, we will now hear from the President of the ICC Staff Union Council, Mr. Uktamion Shomurodov. I would like to note that the Staff Union Council was granted the opportunity to participate on an exceptional basis and on the understanding that such participation does not set a precedent for future sessions of the Assembly. Mr. Shomurodov, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the Bureau and the Presidency of the ASP for giving us, the Staff Union Council, the voice and the opportunity to present our views today. We think that our views of the Council, as a body that represents more than 1,000 staff members here at the headquarters and the country offices, are pertinent to the discussion today. Already at the last ASP, speaking in the context of the review mechanism session, we urged the state parties to protect the staff of the court, many of whom are your nationals, from the external threat of sanctions so that they can focus and deliver on the mandate of the court. We acknowledge that throughout the year, the state parties have made significant diplomatic and other efforts to counter the US sanctions, and we fully appreciate it. We also thank you for the statements of support during the last UN General Assembly and during this ASP for the last 2 days. As you know, this past year has been extremely challenging in terms of external threat of sanctions. Today, with 9 elected officials sanctioned and with the risk of the further escalation by the US administration, staff members are bearing significant consequences and are anxious more than ever. If institutional sanctions are imposed on the court, it will have severe impact on all staff. For the US nationals, this would mean facing a huge risk of being criminally prosecuted and fined up to hundreds of thousands of US dollars. The non-US nationals can themselves be personally sanctioned if they continue supporting the court and consequently be blacklisted by the US administration by freezing of their assets with an access to the US dollar or travel ban to the US for themselves and their families. As we have seen from the experiences of our elected officials, this can impact everything from the ability to use a bank card, using digital services from Airbnb, PayPal, and other US companies. And this risk extends beyond the staff to our families, especially for family members with the US nationals or with family members living in the US. Overcompliance with US sanctions by non-US companies and banks can also add extra challenges for staff members. We acknowledge that the court, in particular the registrar, doing whatever feasible to have alternative arrangements in place in terms of IT systems, banking, and health insurance. The court is also implementing mitigating measures to minimize the impact of sanctions to staff and the court. But the court alone cannot achieve full protection, and we turn to you, the states parties, and the governing body of the court to shield us from that threat of sanctions and to let us continue working to deliver the mandate. We call on you, the state parties, to urgently implement the following recommendations. Number 1, blocking statutes. Activate EU and national blocking statutes to shield the court and its personnel from the coercive measures and its impact. In addition, we think that the state parties should engage with and provide guarantees to the commercial companies in their territories, encouraging them to continue interacting with the court in case of institutional sanctions. Number 2, litigation strategies. We ask the state parties to devise litigation strategies before the US, EU, and national courts and or any other entity to judicially challenge the sanctions on behalf of the court. And number 3, alternative arrangements. The court should be provided with sufficient support so that transitional arrangements are continued to be put in place for the court and its staff to continue the daily functioning, including banking, IT systems, and any other transactions with commercial entities. We, as Staff Union Council, understand that the fact that we are facing these sanctions shows the importance of our work. We consider it an honor and privilege to continue to the mandate of the court, and we stand resolved in our commitment despite these pressures. I thank you for your attention.
I thank you for your statement, and I now invite Mr. Philippe Larochelle to deliver his statement. You have the floor.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, distinguished delegates, excellencies, colleagues, dear friends, I bring you warm greetings from the ICC Bar Association and somewhat colder greetings from our members who have been waiting for some time now for the heating in the meeting rooms to be repaired. But in any case, existential discomfort seems to be the preferred theme of the court, given the times that we're going through, and so perhaps this symbol is actually well chosen. But we're here today at a moment when the ICC is facing challenges that I can only describe as overabundant. Some institutions have growing pains, but the ICC seems to have chronic migraines. And yet, we get the feeling that aspirin, paracetamol, or Advil alone will be insufficient to save international justice.
Let me begin with the obvious. Cooperation with the court. Cooperation should be a non-negotiable concept. The court, and by extension our clients, depend on it. There is no room for compromise. Your states have to comply with the commitments they made when they signed the Rome Statute. Then there is the issue of resources. The ICC's budget is once again described as lean. Lean! We've passed that point. We're getting too skeletal. Defense teams cannot operate effectively without timely access to evidence, experts, and field support. Victims teams cannot meaningfully participate without adequate staffing, translation, and safe access to affected communities. These are not luxuries. They are the minimum conditions required for fair, credible, and efficient proceedings. Let me not forget the current political pressure. The court is criticized by states for acting, criticized by other states for not acting, and criticized by everyone else for acting in the wrong direction at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. The ICCBA, nevertheless, has consistently stood by the court. As stated in our recent press releases, we strongly condemn any sanctions, intimidation, or reprisals that target judges, prosecutors, counsel, or NGOs solely for contributing to our judicial process. Despite these obstacles, the ICC community continues to show extraordinary commitment. Councils continue to file submissions from airport lounges, remote villages, and moving vehicles. Why is that? Because we all dedicate our profession to what we think is well worth it beyond borders. Differently, given our roles, but similarly to the judges of this court who continue to navigate legal and political minefields with elegance and strategic patience. Our Bar Association hopes to be able to remain dedicated to ensure that counsel have the independence, support, and respect required to fulfill their mandates. I say hope because without meaningful support from your states, this might very well be the last time you have the chance to hear from the ICCBA, an organization that you states have decided to recognize and that deserves and requires its space to represent those who form a vital part of this ecosystem. Without competent counsel and support staff, no trial. Without trial, no accountability for international crimes. Defense and Victims Counsel and their teams are not optional accessories to international justice. They are the oxygen that keeps the system alive. Despite limited progress on our requests, the Step 5, the tax issue, the inflation, the legal uncertainty for the support staff, still we persevere. If resilience was remunerated, we would all have earned fortunes. However, I don't want to miss to express my gratitude to all states that have continuously supported us in numerous meetings and communications regarding the question of taxation of our remuneration, which stays an ongoing concern for all our members who are active before this court. I would like to extend a special thanks to Ambassador Atsett of Canada for his leadership of the legal aid facilitation. Despite ongoing challenges, the ICCBA has expanded its engagement with the global legal community, signing cooperation agreements with several regional and national bar associations, building bridges of mutual support and shared professional standards. We warmly invite all delegations to join us at the ICCBA and Friends Conference Nationale des Barreaux side event taking place today at 6:15 in the Mississippi Room. Alors oui, la situation...
So yes, the situation is dire. But international criminal justice has taught us one thing, and that is persevering in the face of impossible obstacles is not naivety, it's a necessity. Excellencies, the ICC needs more than symbolism to survive. It'll need more than speeches to thrive. It'll need more than goodwill alone. It's going to need your concrete support, your ongoing cooperation, and I dare to say your courage. Thank you.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much.
The Bureau also recommended that 45 minutes be allocated to non-governmental organizations for the delivery of statements at the end of the general debate. We will now invite the representatives of non-governmental organizations to present their statements. And the first speaker is Mr. Nicolo Figa Talamanca of the Coalition for the ICC. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Assembly, colleagues. I'm addressing you today on behalf of the Coalition for for the ICC. We are represented at this session of the Assembly by more than 200 human rights defenders from around the world. 30 years ago, we came together as an NGO coalition with one goal: to support the establishment and operation of an independent, effective, and impartial permanent international criminal court. Our mission remains the same today. This year, an escalation of the biggest challenges we have ever faced, threatening the foundations of international justice and the existence of the institutions that we have helped create. It creates unprecedented obstacles to civil society doing its job. ICC judges and prosecutors being subjected to sham criminal prosecutions in the Russian Federation, the United States sanctions against the ICC officials, staff, and particularly civil society organizations cooperating with the court, create new threats to the Rome Statute system. We welcome the strong and principled responses of the state parties that have come together to firmly and without reservations condemn those sanctions and uphold the promise states made in 1998, which is not simply a promise now, but indeed a legal obligation. The world is watching, victims are watching, and the dynamics of impunity are inescapable. When violence and atrocities are rewarded with power and legitimacy, atrocities become the legitimate way to power. This is why we ask the states parties to hold fast to their commitments. Giving way to illegitimate interference in the judicial process just this once will not save the court. It will condemn it forever to being at the mercy of whoever is able and willing to exercise the hardest of pressures. I should add, though, this is not just about criminal prosecutions in Russia and not just about US sanctions. Just as dangerous to the Rome Statute justice system architecture are the repeated and blatant failures to cooperate with the court, even by state parties, in open defiance of the legal obligations to execute arrest warrants and other judicial orders by the ICC. Those threats are not going away soon. We cannot wish them away. In the face of those attacks, we must ensure the court has the political support it needs to withstand this difficult season. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the court requires your concrete support to fulfill the very mandate you bestowed upon it. This means ensures the court has a budget which matches its workload, in full respect of its judicial and prosecutorial independence, so that it may continue to do its work across situations, undeterred by threats and wavering political whims. States must fulfill their end of the bargain by ensuring effective cooperation with the court. We welcome the surrender just yesterday of a suspect of the Libyan situation. It is not the case that the court does not have an enforcement mechanism. State parties are the enforcement mechanism of the court. Cooperation, effective cooperation, is crucial to the court's success. This is why we welcome the plenary dedicated to cooperation at this session. This is also why non-cooperation must carry consequences. Excellencies, early this year, we gathered in New York for the special session of the ASP on the Kampala amendments. Our members are unequivocal in their view that harmonization of the court's jurisdiction over all 4 crimes would bridge the current accountability gap. We ask that you, the court, state parties, show support so that when the current situation is over, the international justice system will remain standing and can continue its work with the support of civil society that has been and will continue to be so crucial in the court discharging its mandate to provide justice and redress for victims. We've heard the reports from the court. The daily work continues, and we as civil society will continue working with everyday issues to contribute to the court's success and the ability to discharge its mandate. However, this year, given the current critical circumstance, I will end where I began. The current threats against the ICC and those who support and cooperate with it namely the sanctions that have been issued against our Palestinian colleagues on the one hand, and the restrictions placed on the human rights work of our US colleagues on the other hand, are the biggest challenges to the ICC's history. We must work to overcome them, not just today, not just tomorrow, not even next year, but for an unknowable long haul. We must stand to support each other, state, civil society and the court, and work together to find sustainable ways to shore its foundations. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the coalition for the statement. And next speaker is Ms. Hanna Rasamakina, Media Initiative for Human on behalf of Zemina, ULAC, MIR and other NGOs from the Ukraine 5 AM coalition. You have the floor.
Madam President, thank you for this opportunity. In 2025, attacks, political pressure, and challenges faced by the International Criminal Court have reached an unprecedented level. Beyond institutional limitations, budgetary constraints, and an overwhelming workload, the court now confronts instances of non-cooperation, threats of withdrawal from the Rome Statute, and the imposition of sanctions. These developments raise deep concern regarding the court's ability to fulfill its mandate, a mandate recognized and protected by 125 state parties. Despite these challenges, the ICC remains the only permanent international criminal tribunal capable of ensuring accountability for crimes of the highest gravity. For victims and affected communities worldwide, the court embodies hope when other jurisdictions are unable or unwilling to prosecute those responsible for atrocity crimes. The situation in Ukraine demonstrates the necessity of a resilient ICC. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, numerous mechanisms have been activated to pursue accountability for conflict-related violations. Yet, nearly 4 years on, they remain inherently limited in addressing the crimes that fall under the ICC's unique mandate, as the violations continue to amass, creating further challenges for justice. Since 2022, the court has issued 6 arrest warrants against senior Russian officials, reflecting its unique capacity to hold top leaders responsible. Where crimes of this gravity are not effectively investigated and persecuted, an impunity gap emerges. The absence of real consequences emboldens those who order, enable, or commit international crimes and signals that such conduct may continue without meaningful accountability. This lack of deterrence directly endangers lives. It increases the risk of further attacks on civilians and of new cycles of violence in Ukraine and beyond. A weakening of the ICC, whether through political attacks, underfunding, or threats of sanctions, undermines the global system of accountability and leaves victims without access to justice. It also removes a critical deterrent to the commission of further crimes. For Ukraine and for the world, a strong ICC is not merely a legal necessity, but a security guarantee. A mechanism that deters further atrocities by ensuring that those who order, enable, or commit them cannot escape responsibility. We are concerned that the current pressures may hinder the court's ability to maintain the pace and visibility of its efforts in Ukraine following the opening of the investigation in 2022. Continued, consistent action is essential to preserve trust in the institution and to demonstrate its indispensable role in addressing the gravest crimes. Therefore, the ICC requires decisive political, financial, and diplomatic support from all stakeholders, and above all from state parties to the Rome Statute. Their commitment is crucial to safeguarding and strengthening an institution that embodies the hope for justice not only for Ukrainian victims, but for victims worldwide, and to ensuring that impunity does not continue to put lives at risk. We call on state parties to provide sustainable funding to the ICC to ensure that budgetary constraints do not limit its ability to investigate and prosecute core international crimes. Publicly and consistently defend the court's independence against political pressure, attacks, sanctions, and attempts to undermine its mandate. Strengthen diplomatic support for the ICC, including responding to threats of withdrawal from the Rome Statute and to measures aimed at obstructing the court's work. Ensure the enforcement of arrest obligations, including taking action when ICC fugitives, such as President Putin, travel to state parties without being arrested, in order to uphold the integrity of the Rome Statute system. Support continued visible progress in the Ukraine situation, recognizing the importance of the 6 arrest warrants issued against senior Russian officials and the court's unique ability to pursue those most responsible. Promote complementarity and coordination between the ICC and other accountability mechanisms, ensuring a coherent and comprehensive justice response for victims. Uphold victim-centered justice, including meaningful participation and communication with affected communities. Thank you for attention.
Thank you for your statement, and I give floor to Mr. George Musipazipa, representing Colombe de la Nature.
Madam President of the Assembly of States Parties, allow me to, first of all, on behalf of Colombe de la Nature, or CDN in its initials, which is from the DRC, to extend to you our warmest congratulations on your election and all of your team at the head of this 24th session of the ASP of States Parties to the Rome Statute of the ICC. Our organization wishes all participants fruitful discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, CDN, our organization which works for the protection of human rights and the environment, has a few concerns to share with you so that we can find the right justice for millions of victims of violence, of conflicts, and also to work towards peace and justice around the world. And we have 4 key considerations that are priorities for us. The first one is human rights in my country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. The situation is very concerning and requires our particular attention. Rwanda's war of aggression and the rebellions that it has stirred up in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo has borne witness to a whole series of human rights violations that have been ongoing now for nearly 30 years of genocide, which has now been recognized. It can no longer be questioned or denied if we take into consideration recent definitions of the concept. We would like to recall that those perpetrating the aggression, the M23AFC, which are supported by Rwanda, in their search for ore in our country, for Western countries and for multinationals, again from the West, do not hesitate to kill, to rape, mutilate, starve, or destroy, sometimes using child soldiers in their evil doings. We are requesting here that this assembly please contribute in one way or another to stop this genocide in the Democratic Republic of Congo so that we can save thousands of victims. And secondly, we need to say that we are firmly opposed to any sanctions imposed by the leaders of this new American administration against the court broadly or its leading elected officials. The very notion of blocking the ICC by attacking its officials is unfounded, it's irresponsible, and inadmissible. All of us, we feel, need to come up with innovative solutions to alleviate or find a way out of this crisis. Thirdly, as concerns cooperation and complementarity, we should like to step outside the sphere of states because others have mentioned it here. What we're proposing are reflections and discussions concerning cooperation and complementarity between the ICC and the ICJ, the International Criminal Court, and the International Court of Justice. This, we think, is applicable to crimes of aggression. Taking such a position will allow a shared judicial strategy across these two international legal institutions when it comes to leaders of countries who are allegedly criminally responsible for abuses undertaken in third countries. Fourthly and finally, we should like to echo all of those who have called for amendments, the compiler amendments, to further shift towards a harmonization of states parties' points of view so that victims are no longer left out of this judicial process, which appears to be working at two different speeds. This is not a discussion in vain because victims, we know that there are many, and they can no longer wait. We can't wait to have the dead or surviving victims growing in number if we fail to talk about it here. Let us show compassion with all of those victims and let us swiftly find compromises so that all of us can arrive at a shared understanding for the good of all humanity. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Ms. Noor Khalifa, representing Libya Crimes Watch and Lawyers for Justice in Libya. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you today on behalf of Libya Crimes Watch, Lawyers for Justice in Libya, and Libyan civil society, in the hopes to convey voices of victims and affected communities in Libya. Through our work in monitoring and documenting, we see every day how the same patterns of international crimes continue unabated. Day after day, year after year, we face a heavy catalog of violations, including arbitrary arrests, torture, enforced disappearance, extrajudicial killings, and the targeting of civil society. These violations are committed by security and military actors affiliated with the de facto authorities in Libya, whether it was in eastern Libya or in the west, with the government of national unity, to the point where impunity has become the rule rather than the exception. For example, since 2024, LCW have documented more than 60 incidents of extrajudicial killings, including cases involving children, resulting from torture, medical neglect, and indiscriminate shellings. And in May, at least 12 civilians were killed during clashes in Tripoli due to the use of heavy weaponry in densely populated areas. More than 70 civilians, including at least 10 women, also remain forcibly disappeared, and since November 2024, following a widespread arrest campaign in eastern Libya over accusations related to witchcraft and sorcery. Serious violations amounting to international crimes continue inside both official and unofficial presence in East and the West, particularly in Granada, El Kuwaifia, and Ma'itiga prison, where civilians, and including activists and human rights defenders, are held for years without trial. As for migrants, They face extremely harsh and inhumane conditions. They are subjected to systematic incitement and hate campaigns orchestrated and encouraged by the authorities, as well as mass arbitrary arrests, mass enforced disappearances, human trafficking, violence, and sexual assault. Security bodies and armed groups have turned this file into a source of profit, detaining migrants and extorting their families for ransom for exchange for their release. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, amid this bleak reality, the court's work in recent months have been the genuine source of hope. The issuance of new arrest warrants and the arrest of the accused Khalid al-Hishri have restored some measure of confidence for victims. But this hope remains fragile unless further steps towards accountability are taken. To this day, and despite the Libyan authorities' declaration of accepting the court's jurisdictions under Article 12.3 of the Rome Statute, and despite Libya's existing obligations under Security Council Resolution 1970, authorities in both East and the West in Libya have not surrendered a single individual wanted by the court, including Osama Njem and Saif Sneedel. This reflects an apparent absence of genuine cooperation and shows that the steps taken so far have not gone beyond symbolic measures. At the same time, the Libyan judicial system remains unable and unwilling to hold those responsible for international crimes to account. It lacks independence, as well as the laws, procedures, and fundamental safeguards necessary for justice, rendering the application of the principle of complementarity unrealistic and unattainable in practice. As a result, victims are left with no avenue for redress other than the International Criminal Court. In light of these realities, the Libyan civil society put forward these recommendations. We call on state parties and the court to use all available pressure to ensure that the Libyan authorities translate the acceptance of the court's jurisdictions into genuine cooperation steps that guarantees the surrender of all individuals sought by the court without exception. We also urge the Office of the Prosecutor to continue its investigations without being bound to rigid timelines. And we further urge the court to issue additional arrest warrants against high officials implicated in international crimes committed in Libya. We recommend that the court reconsiders how the principle of complementarity is applied in the Libyan context. Given the absence of political will and the lack of independence and the structural deficiencies of the Libyan judiciary, which renders national justice systems and pathways currently just unenforceable. Ladies and gentlemen, and Madam President, victims and affected communities in Libya have nothing to hold on except the hope represented by this court. Every step taken here has a direct impact on how close they are to achieving the justice they have waited so many years for. And I leave you on that note. Thank you very much for giving me the time.
I thank you for your statement, and I give now floor to Mr. Rodrigo Diamanti, representing Un Mundo Sin Mordaza. You have the floor.
Dear members of the Assembly of the International Criminal Court, my name is Rodrigo Diamanti, and I am a Venezuelan and a former political prisoner. And I want to say something honest. I want to apologize first to the victims of Venezuela because this system, the one we trusted, failed them when they needed the most. I carry that truth with me every day with a lot of pain. And today I want to share a story that I live. One morning in the streets of The Hague, I encountered Prosecutor Karim Khan. I introduced myself and he said, "Actually, I'm going next week to Venezuela." I replied, "I hope you can do as much as possible for the Venezuelan victims." He nodded and added, "Let me introduce you. This is my sister-in-law." At the time, it felt harmless, but months later, I saw her again, not beside him, but in front of him, inside the court. not as family, but as a counsel representing the very regime he was accusing. How can the prosecutor accuse a regime on one side of the courtroom while a member of his own family defends the same regime at the court? First, he traveled twice to Caracas to shake hands with the perpetrator and sign an MOU, but seeing his sister-in-law defending the regime crossed a moral line for all of us. And dear Assembly, Venezuela never deserved this. We earned better. For years, since 2014 and 2017, systematic violence escalated and the court remained silent. We gathered evidence, we mapped the chain of command, and we pushed for the creation of the panel of experts at the OAS and the fact-finding mission at the United Nations. We also secured something unprecedented, a referral by 6 states parties for the first time in history. And when they were consulted, more than 8,000 victims participated with this court. But here lies the tragic irony. When the investigation was finally opened, the court fell into silence. As repression reached its worst levels, as the repression reached the worst levels in our history. And the question is simple: why the worst surge of repression coincide with the opening of the investigation? And the answer is this one: because the prosecutor adopted a dual-track approach. Dialogue without enforcement, engagement without consequence. According to the panel of experts, after the investigation was opened, torture increased by 150% and enforced disappearance by 105%. And for the first time in a decade, 170 minors and more than 300 women were in prison. And just in 48 hours after the elections, at least 25 people were killed and more than 200,000 were detained, fulfilling the bloodbath that Nicolás Maduro had publicly promised weeks before. And despite this public threat, and despite the execution of that threat, the court remained silent, and the prosecutor remained silent. Dear delegates, I'm not here only to denounce. I'm here to ask for the minimum needed to protect lives in Venezuela. First, the prosecutor must speak publicly and consistently about the crimes being committed. Second, the court must issue arrest warrants in the Venezuelan situation and publicly confirm their existence. Names are not required. Acknowledgement is essential. This will send an important message to the victims that they are not alone, and to the perpetrators that they are not longer safe. Without voice, without warrants, there is no protection. And without protection, there is no justice. Venezuela cannot endure another decade of silence. It's time for this court to become what it was created to be: a line of protection against state terror. As Juan Pablo Pernalete's parents said to me one day, crime against humanity may not expire, but human lives do, like the life of his son murdered by the Nicolás Maduro regime. And I hope that one day I can stand here in front of all of you, not to apologize to the victims, but to thank this court because we finally found justice for all of them. Y a las víctimas de Venezuela les digo,
and to the victims of Venezuela, I say thank you for keep fighting for justice. One day we will make it happen. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. And next speaker is Mr. Raji Al-Surani, representing Al-Haq, Al-Mezan, and Palestinian Center for Human Rights. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam the President, ladies and gentlemen. Today, in Gaza, the situation, business as usual. I mean, the genocide continuing, the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, persecution, and all kinds of violations happening at that part of the world. In the eye of the storm, civilians and civilian targets. We have the massive killing, we have the massive destruction, the famine, and the massive displacement. In the last couple of months, two things has been concluded, led by US and many other countries: ceasefire. On the ground, it doesn't exist, and even Security Council resolution for adoption of Trump plan for peace, it's non-existence. The unfolded genocide, the unfolded ethnic cleansing, continuing non-stop. We engaged with the ICC since 2008, and Palestine became as a member since 2015, January. And we invested our best, and ICC do have the most well-documented conflict in modern history, though they are denied access to the theater and the crime, whether in Gaza, West Bank, or Jerusalem. Right now, we, after 2 years and 2 months, sanctioned as human rights organizations who provide full cooperation, legal documentation, evidence for the ICC. They are almost the only channel who do provide ICC with that. And now we are designated, we are sanctioned by the Treasury to dry up resources and not be able to continue the mission we are having. This is not only related to Palestinian human rights organizations, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank, but it's related to the ICC directly. This comes in a situation where prosecutors were designated and punished, judges designated and punished. It's Palestine, and it's the pain and suffering of Palestinians. It's Israel, where it's feeling fully immune, supported legally, politically, and through sanctioning judges, prosecutors, and Palestinian human rights organizations who are representing and defending and cooperating with the ICC. The threat, it's not for Gaza, it's not for Palestine. The threat for the very existence of the ICC. There is a real serious attempt to assassinate rule of law, the very existence of the ICC. And if they succeed in that, they will succeed in many other cases. That's why I'm appalled and shocked, honestly, by most of the states who are at the ASP, who didn't address this precise issue and confronted this attempt of imposing sanctions, of paralyzing the ICC. And as it has been said before, that target not only bunch of judges and lawyers and prosecutors who are working on Palestine and providing more immunity for genocidal state and its partners. But it's beyond that, the attempt to silence the rule of law. I appeal for you, Mr. President, and Madam President, and for the ASP to take this matter, the attack on judiciary, the attack on prosecutors, judges, and defenders of victims as top priority. If we allow the rule of jungle to prevail, then we are compromising the entire existence of the most important criminal court on earth. We are facing mighty country, strong country, but never ever we have to give up the hope, and we have to stand for a challenge, and we have to keep the strategic optimism all the way and struggle for justice and dignity for victims in Palestine and elsewhere. A few days ago coincided the 80th anniversary of Nuremberg trials. Accountability, it's not a fun, it's not academic experience, it's not intellectual discussion. It's bringing people to the justice they deserve and bringing justice and dignity for victims who suffer these atrocities. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank for your statement, and I give floor to Ms. Ayman Seafielding, International Community Care EV. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, we meet at the 24th session of the Assembly of State Parties at critical juncture for the International Criminal Court and for my country, Sudan, which today endures what has been described as the world's most severe humanitarian catastrophe. As international crimes intensify, the court faces unprecedented political, operational, and institutional threats that jeopardize its ability to deliver justice when it's most needed. I express my deep respect for the judges, Office of the Prosecutor, ICC staff, who uphold justice despite immense challenges, as well as Palestinian civil society organizations, whose documentation of crimes assures victims that accountability can prevail. Sanctions against ICC officials and human rights defenders are an attack on justice and raise serious concerns about the politicizing of international accountability. The court's independence is foundational and must be preserved through cooperation and respect for victims. Concurrently, the withdrawal of the three Sahel states and Hungary from the Rome Statute undermines the universality, especially as civilians in the Sahel endure significant insecurity due to terrorist actions by various armed extremist factions, compounded by severe climate pressure. Additionally, the finding of non-compliance by other states further diminish collective efficiency. In Darfur, ineffective enforcement of arrest warrants, and prolonged delays have enabled genocide and starvation campaigns to continue. 2 decades of waiting have aggravated victims' suffering, while absence of charges for gender-based crimes and crimes against children has left justice incomplete. Madam President, the delay in prosecuting crimes committed since 2004 has worsened the ongoing conflict in Darfur, allowing perpetrators for war crimes and crimes against humanity to spread their atrocities to other parts of Sudan. Victims have called for the court's jurisdictions to be extended to include all Sudan. The spillover into neighboring countries has caused mayhem and violence across the region. The postponement has resulted in more life loss than the referral itself, deepening the suffering of victims who have waited 20 years for justice. Over the years, I have been a dedicated advocate for international justice, and it is disheartening to think I might have to tell the victims that my efforts have been in vain. Survivors of rape, sexual slavery, and children subjected to hunger and forced recruitment have not seen their experiences fully reflected in the proceedings. Meanwhile, slavery and slave markets have flourished. Women have been sold, traded, and subjected to ransom demands, while sexual violence has been systematically deployed as a weapon of war. These crimes are centered to victims' life experiences and must be treated as such during prosecution. Today, Sudan is engulfed in proxy war, fueled by several external actors supplying RSF militias with weapons in breach of the UN arms embargo. This enabled genocidal campaign against Masalit community in El Geneina. The tragedy was compounded by the siege of El Fasher, which lasted for 18 months. During these attacks, more than 460 civilians were reportedly executed in the maternity hospital. These atrocities occur because international justice was not supported, leaving victims exposed and perpetrators supported. Yet, despite 2 decades of waiting, the victims of Darfur continue supporting international justice because, in their understanding, it is the only path to lasting peace as we continue to advocate for the cause despite the delay. The resilience of the victims must inspire the Assembly to act urgently and resolutely. Despite these challenges, the ICC has advanced in mandate. The conviction of Ali Muhammad Ali Abdurrahman Kosheb in Darfur marks the court's first conviction of war crimes referred by the UN Security Council. In the Central African Republic, the conviction of Alfred Yakatom and Beatrice Edward recognized the responsibility of the anti-Bakala commanders. The confirmation of charges against Joseph Kony, even in absentia, was a long-awaited step for thousands of Ugandan victims. The arrest of former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and Germany's surrender of a Libyan suspect show that cooperation can deliver accountability even in the most difficult context. As I conclude, I urge the state parties to advance amendments that enshrine ecocide as a prosecutable crime under the ICC jurisdiction, ensuring accountability for those who deliberately devastating the environment and thereby jeopardize the future of humanity. Protecting ecosystem is indispensable for protecting victims, inseparable from protecting victims, and without it, justice remains incomplete. Excellencies, I urge this Assembly to stand for the ICC in the face of sanctions, defend its independence, neutrality, and impartiality, deliver on commitment to victims' rights, reflect their experiences in proceedings and reparations, strengthening cooperation, enforce arrest warrants, and uphold the obligations of state parties enshrined in the Rome Statute. Advance accountability within the ICC, embody integrity, transparency, and solidarity from within. Ensure comprehensive justice in Darfur and beyond. Prosecute gender crimes, crimes against children, slavery, and sexual slavery fully. The ICC remains the last bridge for many survivors of genocide, war crimes, and gender-based violence to cross to find their next chance. Freedom and lasting peace. Silence and delay are complicity, and neutrality is betrayal. Let us leave The Hague, the city of peace, with a renewed commitment to defend the court, protect victims' rights, and restore hope to those who have endured the gravest crimes and have waited for too long for justice. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement. The interpreters have extended their services beyond the normal time. I thank the interpreters. We have to release them. We still have 3 more speakers, which I propose that we would continue to hear tonight so that we could close our general debate today. Next speaker will be Ms. Momina Yari. She will be speaking on behalf of Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, Afghanistan Organization for Development of Human Rights, Afghanistan Transitional Justice Coordination Group, and the Coalition for the Prevention of Hazara Genocide. You have the floor.
Excellencies, Madam President, honorable judges, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to address this assembly on behalf of the Coalition for the Prevention of Hazara Genocide, Afghanistan Organization for Development of Human Rights, Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, and Afghanistan Transitional Justice Coordination Group. At the moment, millions of my people are suffering from atrocity crimes such as genocide, persecution, and other crimes against humanity and war crimes in Afghanistan. This cause is a direct result of decades of violence and impunity. Madam President, the Taliban's return to the power in 2021, worsening the situation. The principles that guide this court in the human society, such as human dignity, equality, and justice, are violated every single day in Afghanistan. Women and girls have been erased from public life. They are banned from secondary school and universities, barred from work, restricted in their movement, and stripped of their most basic rights. This is not isolated discrimination. It is a crime against humanity, of gender persecution, and as human rights advocates say, it is also gender apartheid. We welcome the issuance of arrest warrants against the 2 Taliban leaders and emphasize for more perpetrators. Afghanistan's ethnic and religious minorities and marginalized groups especially the Hazara community, have faced a pattern of targeted bombings, execution, forced displacement, and attacks on schools, mosques, and places of work. The nature and consistency of some of these atrocity crimes reflect clear indicators outlined in Article 6 of the Rome Statute and the Genocide Convention in amount to genocide. These atrocities must be recognized, stopped, prevented, and investigated with the full weight of the legal and ethical framework governing, addressing, preventing, and punishing genocide. Excellencies, across the country, civilians continue to suffer past and ongoing extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detentions, torture, and forced disappearance, and the destructions of essential infrastructure. These acts, committed by the de facto authorities and various armed groups inside Afghanistan, constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. Impunity has emboldened perpetrators for over 4 decades. Victims deserve more than sympathy. They deserve actions grounded in international law that put their needs and well-beings at the center of any efforts. Madam President, another urgent concern is the mass deportation of Afghan refugees from neighboring countries, particularly Pakistan and Iran. Women, children, human rights defenders, and members of groups at risk of persecution are being forced back into conditions where their lives are at immediate risk. They need protection. Excellency, Madam President, the situation in Afghanistan and other countries show how much millions of people depend on the international criminal courts of justice. We are deeply concerned about any policies or actions that threaten the court or its officials. Millions of survivors, including my people, are watching this assembly. The court must be protected, and state parties must act swiftly and decisively to defend its independence. Furthermore, I urge this assembly to amend Article 7 of the Rome Statute and codify gender apartheid as a new crime against humanity and recognize the Taliban's anti-women policies and actions as gender persecution and gender apartheid. This is really not a story. It is really happening inside Afghanistan by the Taliban regime, barring women from all activities inside Afghanistan. They are banning women from every social activities. And to fully cooperate with the OTP investigation and implementation of arrest warrants. 2, recognize genocide committed against Hazara and support investigation into this genocidal campaign against the Hazara community. and put measures in place to protect the community and prevent and stop genocide of Hazara community. 3, ensure continuity, independence, and impartiality of the ICC by providing protection to the ICC as an institution and to staff from sanctions. Excellencies, despite immense suffering, the Afghan people have not abandoned hope. Afghan women continue to resist with extraordinary courage. Afghan youth continue to dream of a future built on rights and freedom. Human rights defenders continue their work at great personal risk. If Afghan women, silenced, banned, and imprisoned, still find the strength to speak, then the international community has no excuse to remain silent. I ask this assembly to let our collective voice today be a source of strength for those who cannot be here. Thank you, Madam President, for your attention.
Thank you for your statement. And the second last speaker will be Mr. Vincent Kimati Mutora, representing the Kenyan section of the International Commission of Jurists. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm honored to address the honorable delegates and observers. I take this opportunity to thank the Assembly for taking time to allow organizations to contribute to the debate on the various issues of our deliberations. As you deliberate on these issues, it is important to reaffirm the foundational principle of the Rome Statute, the absolute independence and impartiality of the International Criminal Court. We remind all state parties and the broader international community that safeguarding the ICC independence is not only a legal obligation, but a moral imperative central to the global fight against impunity. We are equally gravely concerned by the worsening atrocities and humanitarian sufferings in Sudan, where civilians continue to endure widespread and systematic violence. These serious crimes require urgent and resolute action. We call on the ICC to accelerate its investigative and prosecutorial efforts regarding the situation in Sudan and to focus on ensuring accountability for the most responsible. We also urge state parties, especially governments in the region, to fully cooperate with the court, facilitate unhindered access, and support all necessary measures to secure justice for victims who have already waited for far too long. We further draw the Assembly's attention to the concerning reports from Tanzania regarding the human rights situation before, during, and after the recent electoral period. Civil society organizations and independent observers have documented allegations of excessive use of force, arbitrary arrests, enforced disappearances, and incidents resulting in the killing of civilians in Tanzania. We respectively urge the International Criminal Court to closely monitor the situation and where the legal thresholds under the Rome Statute appear to be met, to consider preliminary assessment into these allegations. We also call on the court to engage with the relevant stakeholders to ensure that any serious violations do not go unaddressed, and that accountability mechanisms are available to victims whose rights may have been gravely infringed. As the Assembly gathers in this session, we echo the call for state parties to reaffirm their political, diplomatic, and practical support for the ICC. Now more than ever, it is vital that states collectively defend the court from external interference and ensure that its officials can carry out their duties free from threats, pressure, or reprisals. The Kenyan section of the International Commission of Jurists commends the International Criminal Court and its officials for their steadfast commitment to justice and accountability in the face of unprecedented challenges during the intersessional period. We urge the Assembly to adopt concrete measures that, one, condemn and counteracts any counteracts of intimidation or coercion against court officials and those cooperating with the ICC. Two, reaffirm the collective commitment to the independence of the court and the universality of the Rome Statute. And state parties, especially those in the African region, should strengthen and demonstrate full cooperation with the ICC in relation to the situation in Sudan. In closing, as I close, the Kenyan section of the International Commission of Jurists stands in full solidarity with the court, its officials, and all who contribute to its work. We remain guided by the shared vision of a world where justice is not selective and accountability is not an option. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. And the last speaker, but not the least, will be Ms. Luna Andersen-Frank, representing Eco Justice. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my honour to speak to you today on behalf of Ecojustice.earth, formerly known as Stop Ecocide Netherlands, and as a new member of the Coalition for the ICC. We stand at a pivotal moment in history where the scale of environmental destruction and the corresponding existential threat to life demands a legal response equal to its gravity. The history of severe ecological harm serves as our shared warning. From the use of Agent Orange in Vietnam and the catastrophic Kuwait oil fires during conflict, and emerging peacetime threats such as the strategic depletion of transboundary water resources and deep-sea mining. These acts reveal a pattern of systemic impunity that undermines human security and planetary stability. At Ecojustice, we recognize the power of criminal law to delineate what is morally acceptable. As such, we acknowledge the criminalization of severe and either widespread or long-term environmental damage, or ecocide, as imperative to recognizing the associated moral transgressions. Our mission is clear: to shift from exploitation to sustainable coexistence by holding those who perpetrate mass ecological harm to account under the rule of law. Through our flagship campaign, Generation Ecojustice, we provide the necessary legal groundwork and advocacy to accelerate the global movement for environmental justice, ensuring it becomes broader and deeper in scope. It's in this spirit that we call on the international justice community to embrace long-term, principled accountability for the planet that we share. Nature teaches us that survival is a story written in generations. If we are to honor that truth, our decisions must echo beyond the present. Across the globe, we're beginning to see glimmers of this vision in action. States experimenting with stronger criminal accountability for environmental destruction. In Europe, for example, the Environmental Crimes Directive is pushing the boundaries of criminal law in setting new standards for prosecuting environmental crimes, including particularly serious offences akin to ecocide. In this regard, the ICC is also on the verge of an important development. The Office of the Prosecutor has undertaken a comprehensive review into whether it's already possible to address serious environmental damage under the existing crimes in the Rome Statute. The resulting policy paper, which the prosecutor will launch on December the 4th at the ASP, could be another breakthrough for global environmental justice. We wholeheartedly support this development, and if, according to the OTP, the Rome Statute can indeed be leveraged for these cases, then we, as Generation Ecojustice, will actively implement the framework established by the Office in our field of work. Consistent with this commitment, our input into the consultation on the policy paper last February urged the inclusion of cultural heritage among the policy's key terms, the expansion of paragraph 29 of the draft policy paper on assessing the gravity of environment-specific factors, and address the processing of communications filed pursuant to Article 15 of the Rome Statute. This would be a landmark step, but we must nevertheless continue to recognize the necessity of addressing legislative gaps. While some countries are making positive steps, there is no unified international response to the most egregious acts of environmental destruction in both times of peace and conflict. Madam President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the future will judge not by intentions, but by actions, and by whether we, as a global community, had the courage to prosecute environmental harm with the seriousness it demands. Together, we can transform criminal law into a powerful tool for ecological accountability, and not just to punish, but to prevent and to restore. Future generations will come to ask, did we act when we had the chance? Let our answer be yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. And that brings us to the end of our general debate. I would like to thank all the speakers for all their statements presented during the general debate agenda item and for the support pledged to the court, its officials, to the Secretariat, to the Presidency of the Assembly. And I thank you all also for answering to my call to address in this general debate the thematic theme, concrete measures to strengthen the ICC. I will declare now the agenda item 7, general debate closed, and I wish you all pleasant evening. And that, unless there are any requests for the floor, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.